The Met Gala red carpet exploded with camera flashes as Claire Parker stepped out of the town car, her hand steady in Adrian Vale's palm. The emerald gown draped perfectly over her 6-month pregnancy, diamonds catching the light like trapped stars. Somewhere in the crowd behind the velvet ropes, Ethan Pierce went rigid, his champagne smile cracking into something ugly. This was supposed to be his night, his triumph, his spotlight. But the woman he'd publicly humiliated, the wife he'd called forgettable in a viral post 6 months ago, had just stolen every camera, every gasp, every headline. And she hadn't even looked his way. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, drop a comment below with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Now, let's go back to where it all started. The penthouse smelled like expensive cologne and fresh lies. Claire Parker stood in the doorway of what used to be their bedroom, hers and Ethan's, watching her husband of 3 years fold a Tom Ford suit into a leather weekender bag with the careful precision of someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. The late afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Manhattan into a postcard behind him, all golden light and glittering promise. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion. "You're really doing this," she said. Not a question. Her voice came out steadier than she expected, though her hands were trembling against her sides. "Right now." Ethan didn't look up. He'd always been handsome in that sharp-featured, carefully constructed way, the kind of face that photographed well, that made people at parties lean in when he talked. Square jaw, perfect teeth, dark hair styled with just enough product to look effortless. He'd built an entire career in luxury real estate on that face, on the trust it generated, the authority it commanded. Right now, though, his expression was carved from ice. "Claire, we've been over this." He zipped the bag with a crisp snap that seemed to punctuate the end of something. "You had to know this was coming. We've been growing apart for months." Growing apart, like they were continents drifting on tectonic plates, instead of two people who'd promised forever in front of 200 guests just 3 years ago. Claire's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, still flat. The pregnancy only 8 weeks along, a secret she'd been holding like a fragile bird for the past 2 days, waiting for the right moment to tell him, waiting for one perfect evening when he wasn't exhausted from showings or distracted by his phone. The right moment apparently had never been coming. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words dropped into the space between them like stones into deep water. For a moment, Ethan went completely still, his hand frozen on the zipper of a second bag. Then he straightened, and the look he gave her was worse than anger. It was inconvenience, mild irritation at a complication he hadn't factored into his carefully orchestrated exit. "Jesus, Claire." He dragged a hand through his hair, disrupting the careful styling. "The timing on this is... the timing!" Her voice cracked, but she forced it back under control. "Ethan, I'm telling you we're having a baby. Your baby. Our baby." "Are you sure it's mine?" The question hit like a physical blow. Claire actually took a step back, her shoulders hitting the doorframe. In 3 years of marriage, through all the small betrayals and growing distances, through the late nights he'd stopped explaining and the texts he'd angled away from her sight, she had never once imagined he would look at her with such casual cruelty. "How can you—" She couldn't finish, couldn't breathe properly around the sharp thing lodged in her chest. Ethan had the grace to look away, but not to apologize. "Look, I didn't mean that, but you have to admit the timing is suspicious. Right when things between us are ending, suddenly you're pregnant. I took the test 2 days ago. I've been trying to tell you. It doesn't matter." He picked up both bags, hefting them like they weighed nothing, like he was walking out for a business trip instead of forever. "I'm done, Claire. With this marriage, with this version of my life. I've been suffocating here, playing the dutiful husband to someone who can't even keep my interest for a full evening." The words were designed to wound, surgical in their precision. Claire felt them land, felt something inside her crack and splinter. She'd known they were in trouble, had felt him pulling away, becoming someone she didn't recognize, someone obsessed with image, with social media metrics, with maintaining a certain lifestyle aesthetic. But she'd thought they could fix it. Thought love was supposed to be enough to weather rough patches. Apparently, she'd thought wrong. "Who is she?" The question came out before Claire could stop it. Ethan's smile was thin and triumphant, like he'd been waiting for her to ask. He pulled out his phone, tapped it a few times, then turned the screen toward her. The Instagram profile showed a woman who looked like she'd been sculpted by a team of professionals and good lighting. High cheekbones, full lips, masses of dark hair styled in beach waves. Sienna Rossi, the bio read, actress, model, living my best life. The photos were a gallery of calculated perfection. Sienna in a bikini on a yacht. Sienna in designer athleisure with a green juice. Sienna posing at gallery openings and charity galas. Everything shot in that soft, focused, golden hour style that dominated social media. Every image screaming, look at me, look at how beautiful my life is. We met at the Hamptons fundraiser last month, Ethan said, and there was something almost proud in his voice. She's exactly what I need right now. Someone who understands ambition, who knows how to present herself, who can keep up with where I'm going in life. The implication hung heavy in the air. You can't. Claire stared at the phone screen, at this stranger who was apparently worth destroying their marriage for, and felt something shift inside her. Not just heartbreak. That was already there, already crushing her ribs and stealing her breath. This was something colder, clearer. So that's it, she said softly. 3 years of marriage, a baby on the way, and you're trading it all for someone with good Instagram engagement. Don't be reductive. Ethan pocketed his phone and moved toward the door, toward her, and Claire had to force herself not to flinch back. This isn't about social media. It's about knowing what I want and having the courage to go after it. You could learn something from that, Claire. You've always been so passive, so willing to just accept whatever life hands you. Maybe that's part of why this didn't work. He brushed past her, bags in hand, leaving a wake of cologne and condescension. Claire turned to watch him walk through their living room, the space they'd furnished together, argued over paint colors for, hosted dinner parties in. Every surface held a memory, and he was moving through them like they meant nothing. At the door, he paused. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. And Claire? He looked back over his shoulder. Whatever you decide about the pregnancy, that's your choice. But don't expect me to play house. That's not the life I want anymore. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut with terrible finality. Claire stood frozen in the sudden silence, her hand still pressed against her stomach where a cluster of cells was growing into a person who would never know their father wanted nothing to do with them. The apartment felt cavernous around her, all exposed brick and sleek furniture that had been chosen for aesthetics rather than comfort. This had never really been a home, she realized. It had been a stage set for Ethan's vision of his perfect life, and she had been a prop that no longer served the scene. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, text notifications piling up. With numb fingers, Claire pulled out her phone and watched her screen fill with alerts. Instagram tags, Twitter mentions, messages from friends and former colleagues. With a sick feeling of dread, she opened Instagram. The first post was from Ethan's account, posted 17 minutes ago. The photo showed him in the back of a car, Sienna tucked against his side, both of them smiling like they'd just won something. The caption made Claire's vision blur. Starting the next chapter with someone who matches my energy. Sometimes you have to let go of what's holding you back to make room for what lifts you higher. Hashtag new beginnings. Hashtag level up, level up. Hashtag best life starts now. Claire's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. He'd posted it before he'd even left the building. Had probably taken the photo in the elevator, unable to wait until he was free of their shared space to start broadcasting his upgrade. But it got worse. She was tagged. Her private Instagram account, the one she barely used that had maybe 50 followers, mostly family and close friends, was tagged in the post. And the comments were already flooding in. Who's the old wife? Damn, that's an upgrade for sure. My man really said new year, new me. The first wife is always the practice round. LMAO. Claire's thumb moved almost without conscious thought, clicking through to Ethan's profile. He'd been busy. In the past month, there were dozens of posts she'd somehow missed. Ethan and Sienna at restaurant openings, at private clubs, at rooftop parties with Manhattan glittering behind them. Every photo professionally lit, perfectly composed, drowning in filters and hashtags. And in several of them, he'd tagged Claire. Not to include her, not to share moments with her, but to make sure she saw. To make sure she knew exactly what he was doing, who he was doing it with, and how much better his new life looked compared to their old one. It was psychological warfare dressed up as lifestyle content. Claire's phone rang, making her jump. Her best friend Mara's name flashed across the screen. She answered without thinking. Claire, oh my God, I just saw… Are you okay? Where are you? I'm coming over right now. He left me. Claire's voice came out hollow. He's been cheating for at least a month, probably longer. And I'm pregnant, Mara, 8 weeks pregnant. And he walked out, said the baby wasn't his problem. Silence on the other end, heavy with shock and fury. I'm getting in a cab right now, Mara said, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. Don't move, don't look at social media, don't do anything except maybe pour yourself some water and sit down. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But after she hung up, Claire couldn't stop herself from looking. She scrolled through post after post, watching her husband curate a narrative of his perfect new life. Sienna fitted into that narrative seamlessly, beautiful, poised, always camera ready. The kind of woman who knew her angles, who never had a hair out of place, who could make even a casual coffee run look like a fashion shoot. Claire caught her reflection in the darkening window. Pale skin, mouse-brown hair pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing yoga pants and one of Ethan's old Columbia t-shirts because it was comfortable. No makeup, no careful styling. Just a tired woman in her late 20s who'd spent the day researching landscape architecture projects and hadn't thought to make herself Instagram ready. When had she become so invisible? The apartment felt like it was closing in on her. Claire grabbed her keys and wallet, shoved her feet into sneakers, and fled into the hallway. She couldn't stay in that space, surrounded by the ghost of a marriage that had apparently died without her noticing. The elevator ride down felt endless, and when she burst out into the lobby, the doorman, Marcus, who'd worked the building for 5 years, gave her a sympathetic look that made her want to scream. Everyone knew. Of course everyone knew. Ethan had made sure of it. She walked without direction, letting her feet carry her through Manhattan's early evening rush. Around her, the city pulsed with life. People heading home from work, couples meeting for dinner, tourists snapping photos of buildings that scraped the sky. Everyone moving with purpose, with destination, while Claire drifted like debris. Her phone kept buzzing. More notifications, more people witnessing her humiliation in real time. She ended up in Bryant Park, collapsing onto a bench near the fountain. The park was scattered with people. A man playing guitar for tips, office workers eating late lunches, a group of teenagers taking selfies by the carousel. Normal life, happening all around her while her own world imploded. Claire pulled out her phone again, hating herself for it, but unable to stop. Ethan had posted a new photo 20 minutes ago, him and Sienna at some trendy restaurant in the meatpacking district, champagne glasses raised. The caption read, "Celebrating new adventures with my incredible muse. Life's too short to settle for anything less than extraordinary. At Sienna Rossi is teaching me what it means to truly live." And there, in the tags, at Claire M. Parker. He'd tagged her in a post about celebrating their breakup, about how his new girlfriend was teaching him to truly live, implying that their entire marriage had been some kind of half-death. Something hot and sharp rose in Claire's throat. She barely made it to the trash can before she threw up, her body rejecting the cruelty even as her mind tried to process it. A concerned stranger asked if she needed help, but Claire waved them off, wiping her mouth with shaking hands. This was her life now. Pregnant and alone, publicly humiliated by a man she'd trusted completely, watching him build a glossy new existence on the ruins of their relationship. Claire! She looked up to find Mara running toward her, phone in one hand, concern etched across her face. Mara Chen had been Claire's friend since college, fierce, loyal, completely unwilling to tolerate anyone's bullshit. She took one look at Claire's face and immediately pulled her into a hug so tight it hurt. "I'm going to kill him," Mara said into Claire's hair. "I'm going to absolutely murder him. How are you even standing right now?" "I don't know," Claire admitted, and then the tears came, hot and unstoppable. She cried into her best friend's shoulder while Manhattan rushed past them, indifferent to one woman's breaking heart. They sat on that bench for over an hour while Claire told her everything: the pregnancy, Ethan's casual cruelty, the Instagram post designed to maximize her pain. Mara listened with increasingly creative threats of violence, her arm never leaving Claire's shoulders. "You can't stay in that apartment," Mara said finally. "Not tonight, probably not ever. My place is too small, but my brother's in Brooklyn and he's got that rent-controlled 2-bedroom he's barely using. You could stay there while you figure things out." Claire should have argued. Should have insisted she was fine, that she could handle sleeping in the bed she'd shared with Ethan, surrounded by reminders of their failed marriage. But the thought of going back to that penthouse made her feel sick again. "Just for tonight," she said weakly. "For as long as you need," Mara corrected. "Now come on. We're getting your essentials and getting you out of there before I do something that ends up on the news." They took a cab back to the penthouse. The doorman tried to make sympathetic small talk, but Mara shut him down with a look that could have stripped paint. Upstairs, Claire moved through the apartment like a ghost, packing clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag. Her hands moved automatically. Underwear, jeans, sweaters, the prenatal vitamins she'd bought 2 days ago with such hopeful nervousness. In the bathroom, she paused in front of the mirror, really looked at herself for the first time in hours. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face blotchy and pale. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman whose life had just detonated. But underneath the devastation, underneath the shock and humiliation, something else was stirring, something that felt almost like anger. Ethan thought he could discard her like an old accessory that no longer matched his aesthetic. Thought he could publicly humiliate her, tag her in his victory lap, make her a footnote in his curated narrative of success. He expected her to disappear quietly, to make his transition to his new, better life as smooth as possible. Claire pressed her palm against her stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing something was there. Something growing, something that would need her to be stronger than she felt in this moment. "I'm not going to disappear," she said to her reflection. The words came out rough, but they came out. "I'm not going to make this easy for you." She didn't know what that meant yet. Didn't have a plan. Didn't have anything except a broken heart and a pregnancy test shoved in the bottom of her purse. But it was something. A spark in the wreckage. Mara appeared in the bathroom doorway. "Ready?" "Yeah." Claire grabbed her bag. "Let's go." They were halfway to the door when Claire's phone buzzed again. Another Instagram notification. Against her better judgment, she checked it. Ethan had posted again. This time it was a photo of Sienna alone, laughing at something off camera, bathed in the warm light of what looked like an expensive restaurant. The caption made Claire's blood run cold. When you realize you've been living in black and white and suddenly the world is in color. At Sienna Rossi reminds me every day what I was missing. Some people are meant to be chapter ones, but the real story starts when you find your leading lady. Chapter 1. He'd reduced their entire marriage to a prologue, and he'd tagged Claire in it. "Don't look at it," Mara said, but Claire was already reading the comments. "Your ex must be sick. Watching this king behavior, honestly. New girl is literally a movie star compared to... Yikes. Sometimes you gotta drop dead weight to fly. Good for you, man." Claire's finger hovered over the comment section. She could respond, could tell the truth about what Ethan had done, about the baby he was abandoning, about the calculated cruelty of these posts. Could fight back, defend herself, make sure everyone knew she wasn't just some forgettable first wife. But what would that accomplish? He'd already won the narrative. His posts were aspirational, inspirational even, a man brave enough to choose happiness over obligation. If she spoke up, she had just become the bitter ex, the scorned woman who couldn't accept that he'd moved on. She closed Instagram and shoved her phone in her pocket. "Let's get out of here," she said. Mara's brother's apartment in Brooklyn was everything Ethan's penthouse wasn't. Small, cluttered with books and plants, warm in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The couch was old but comfortable, and Mara made Claire tea while explaining that Derek was traveling for work and wouldn't mind her staying as long as she needed. "He's been trying to find a subletter anyway," Mara said, setting down a mug of chamomile. "You'd actually be doing him a favor." Claire wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. "I can't afford Manhattan rent on my freelance income, especially not now." "This isn't Manhattan, and Derek won't gouge you. We'll figure out something fair." Mara sat down beside her. "Claire, I need you to hear me. What Ethan is doing, the posts, the tagging, all of it, that's not normal breakup behavior. That's psychological abuse. He's deliberately trying to hurt you, to humiliate you publicly." "I know." Claire's voice was small. "Do you? Because I need you to really understand that none of this is your fault. You didn't fail at your marriage. He blew it up because he's a narcissistic asshole who cares more about Instagram likes than actual human connection." Claire wanted to believe that, wanted to separate herself from the narrative Ethan was building, where she was the boring, forgettable wife who'd held him back from his true potential. But his words kept echoing in her head. You've always been so passive, so willing to just accept whatever life hands you. Was that true? Had she been sleepwalking through her own life, so focused on being a supportive wife that she'd forgotten to be an actual person? I don't know who I am anymore, Claire admitted. I've spent 3 years trying to be what Ethan needed. And before that, I was so focused on building my career, on proving I could make it in landscape architecture. I don't know if I've ever just been me. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then, so figure it out. You've got time. You're pregnant, not dying. And honestly, this might be the best thing that could have happened. Claire looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Hear me out, Mara continued. If Ethan had stayed, he would have made you miserable. He would have turned fatherhood into content, would have tagged the baby in posts about his perfect family while treating you like hired help. You would have spent years trying to be enough for someone who fundamentally doesn't value you. At least now you're free of that. At least now you get to rebuild on your own terms. It was a nice thought, but sitting in a borrowed apartment with a duffel bag of hastily packed belongings and a husband who'd already moved on, Claire felt anything but free. Her phone buzzed again. She should have turned it off, should have given herself a break from the constant notifications. But some masochistic part of her needed to see how much worse it could get. This time it was a text from her mother. Claire, your aunt just sent me Ethan's Instagram. Please tell me this isn't true. Call me immediately. Perfect. Now her family knew. By tomorrow, everyone she'd ever known would know. The humiliation was spreading like a virus, infecting every corner of her life. You should block him, Mara said. Block Ethan, block Sienna, make your Instagram private. Stop letting him have access to your attention. He'll just find other ways to twist the knife. Maybe, but you don't have to hand him the blade. Claire stared at her phone, at the notifications still rolling in. Mara was right. She couldn't control what Ethan posted, couldn't stop him from building his glossy narrative, but she could control whether she subjected herself to it. With hands that only shook a little, she opened Instagram and blocked Ethan Pierce, then Sienna Rossi, then made her account private and turned off all notifications. It felt like closing a door, a small act of self-preservation in a day full of destruction. There, she said. Done. Mara squeezed her hand. That's a start. Now, I'm ordering Thai food, and we're watching terrible reality TV until you fall asleep. Tomorrow, we figure out next steps. But tonight, you just exist. Deal? Deal. They ordered too much food and ate it straight from the containers while watching people have manufactured drama on a dating show. It was mind-numbing and perfect, exactly what Claire needed. For a few hours, she didn't think about Ethan or Sienna or the baby growing inside her or the wreckage of her life. But that night, alone in Derek's guest bedroom with unfamiliar shadows on the ceiling, the reality of it all crashed back over her. She was 28, pregnant, essentially homeless, and publicly humiliated. Her husband, ex-husband, soon, had traded her for an Instagram model and was actively using social media as a weapon to maximize her pain. Claire pressed her hands against her stomach, trying to feel something, any hint of the life growing there. Too early, she knew. But she needed to connect with it somehow, needed to believe that something good could come from this disaster. I don't know how to do this, she whispered into the darkness. I don't know how to be a single mother. I don't even know how to be alone. The baby, of course, didn't answer. But somewhere in the silence, Claire made herself a promise. She would not let Ethan's cruelty define her, would not let him turn her into the pathetic, discarded wife he wanted her to be. She didn't know how yet, didn't have a plan or resources or even a clear sense of direction. But she would figure it out. She had to. Because in 7.5 months, someone was going to depend on her completely. And Claire Parker might not know who she was anymore. But she knew she wasn't going to let her child down the way Ethan had let them both down. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee from the kitchen. Mara had stayed over, sleeping on the couch, and was now making breakfast with the focused efficiency of someone on a mission. Okay, Mara said when Claire stumbled into the kitchen. I've been thinking. You need 3 things: income, healthcare, and a lawyer. In that order. Claire accepted the coffee, decaf, Mara had remembered, and tried to pull her scattered thoughts together. I have some freelance clients, enough to cover basic expenses if I'm careful, and I'm still on Ethan's insurance through the end of the month, which means you need to schedule an OB appointment immediately. Today, if possible. Document everything about the pregnancy while you're still covered. Mara pulled out her phone. And I'm texting you the contact for my cousin's divorce lawyer. She's aggressive as hell and doesn't take prisoners. You'll like her. Claire should have felt grateful. Should have been relieved that someone was helping her create order from chaos. Instead, she just felt numb, like she was watching her life happen to someone else. I can't afford an aggressive lawyer, Mara. She does pro bono work for women in difficult situations, and abandoning your pregnant wife definitely qualifies. Mara set down a plate of scrambled eggs. Eat. You're growing a human. You need protein. They spent the morning making calls. An OB appointment was scheduled for the following week. The lawyer, Jennifer Ramos, agreed to meet Thursday. Mara helped Claire draft emails to her current freelance clients, professional and careful, giving no hint of the personal chaos consuming her life. By early afternoon, Claire had the skeleton of a plan. It wasn't much, but it was something to hold on to. I need to go back to the apartment, she said, get the rest of my things. Officially move out. Mara's expression went fierce. Not alone. I'm coming with you, and we're bringing Jess. Jessica Torres was their third musketeer from college, a corporate lawyer with zero tolerance for manipulation. Between the three of them, they descended on the penthouse like a small, determined army. Ethan, mercifully, wasn't there, probably off somewhere taking photos of his perfect new life. Claire packed methodically. Her clothes, her books, her laptop and work files, personal items that had somehow survived 3 years of Ethan's aesthetic control. Photos from college, a quilt her grandmother had made, the drafting set she'd gotten for her 21st birthday. Things that were hers, that predated Ethan, that reminded her she'd existed before him and would continue existing after. In the back of her closet, she found a box of her old design work from grad school. Sketches and renderings of public spaces, parks and plazas and rooftop gardens. She'd been good at this once, had won awards, had professors telling her she had real talent. When had she stopped creating? When had her entire identity become Ethan's wife? You should take the dining table, Jess said, appearing in the doorway. You picked it out. You paid for half of it. It won't fit in Derek's apartment. Oh, so put it in storage. Don't leave him everything just because it's easier. But Claire was so tired, tired of fighting, tired of caring, tired of existing in the same space as memories of her failed marriage. She wanted to leave it all behind, walk away clean, start over with nothing if that's what it took. Let him have it, she said. I don't want anything that reminds me of this place. They were loading the last boxes into Jess's car when Claire's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Claire Parker? A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Yes? This is Amanda Chen from Metropolitan Design Associates. We received your portfolio submission a few months ago for our landscape architecture position. I apologize for the delayed response. We've been restructuring. But we were very impressed with your work, and we'd like to schedule an interview if you're still interested in the position. Claire's mind went blank. She'd applied to MDA back in January, before everything fell apart. It had been a reach. They were one of the top firms in New York, known for innovative public space design. She'd sent her portfolio on a whim, never expecting to hear back. Yes, she managed. Yes, I'm very interested. Excellent. Would next Tuesday work for you? Say 10 a.m.? Tuesday is perfect. She hung up in a daze. Mara and Jess were watching her with identical expressions of confusion. What was that? Mara asked. A job interview at Metropolitan Design Associates. Claire felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, something that might have been hope. A real job, with benefits and a salary and everything. For the first time since Ethan had walked out, she felt like maybe, possibly, she could build something from the wreckage. Not today, not even tomorrow. But eventually, it was something to hold on to, and right now that was enough. The Tuesday morning air had that peculiar crispness that only early March in New York could deliver. Winter reluctantly giving ground to spring, the city caught between seasons. Claire stood outside the glass and steel tower that housed Metropolitan Design Associates, her portfolio clutched against her chest like armor. She'd changed outfits 4 times that morning, finally settling on tailored black pants and a silk blouse that skimmed her stomach without clinging. At 10 weeks pregnant, she wasn't showing yet, but she felt hyper-aware of every curve, every potential tell. The baby was her secret, her power to keep or share. And today, facing this interview that could change everything, she chose to keep it close. Inside, the MDA offices occupied the entire 23rd floor, all open concept workspace with living green walls and natural light flooding through floor-to-ceiling windows. Young designers hunched over drafting tables and computer screens, their workspace dotted with plant specimens and material samples. It was exactly the kind of environment Claire had dreamed about during grad school: collaborative, creative, alive with possibility. Claire Parker? A woman in her 40s approached, hand extended. Amanda Chen looked like she'd walked out of an Architectural Digest spread. Sharp blazer, geometric jewelry, silver-streaked black hair cut in a precise bob. "Thank you for coming in. I'm sorry again about our delayed response. Our senior landscape architect retired rather suddenly, and we've been scrambling." "I appreciate the opportunity," Claire said, shaking her hand with more confidence than she felt. Amanda led her through the office, pointing out current projects: a waterfront park in Red Hook, a rooftop garden for a midtown office building, a plaza redesign in the financial district. Claire's fingers itched to touch the renderings, to dive into the technical specifications, to be part of something that mattered. The interview took place in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. 3 other people joined them: the creative director, a senior architect, and another landscape designer. They spread Claire's portfolio across the table, studying her work with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "This meditation garden design," the creative director said, tapping one of Claire's grad school projects. "The way you've integrated the water features with the native plantings, it's subtle, sophisticated. We've been looking for someone who understands that landscape architecture isn't just about making things pretty. It's about creating functional ecosystems." "That's always been my approach," Claire said, finding her footing. "Beauty should be a byproduct of good design, not the primary goal. When you prioritize ecological function and human interaction, aesthetics follow naturally." They spent an hour diving deep into her design philosophy, her technical skills, her experience with permit processes and client management. Claire felt herself relaxing into the conversation, remembering why she'd fallen in love with this work in the first place. Here, she wasn't Ethan's discarded wife or a future single mother drowning in uncertainty. She was a designer with ideas and expertise worth discussing. "I'll be honest," Amanda said as the interview wound down. "We're moving quickly on this. We need someone who can jump in immediately on several active projects. The rooftop garden I mentioned, that's a high-profile client, very particular about their vision. We're behind schedule and need someone who can handle both the design work and the client diplomacy." "I can do that," Claire said without hesitation. Amanda smiled. "I believe you. Let me discuss with the team, but I think you'll be hearing from us very soon." Claire floated out of the building on a cloud of cautious optimism. The interview had gone well, better than well. For the first time in 2 weeks, she'd felt like herself, capable, skilled, valued for something other than how well she accessorized someone else's life. Her phone buzzed as she emerged onto the street. Mara, checking in. Instead of texting back, Claire called her. "How did it go?" Mara answered without preamble. "I think I might have actually nailed it." Claire couldn't keep the smile out of her voice. "They seemed genuinely impressed. Said they'd call soon." "That's my girl, we're celebrating. Dinner tonight, my treat, somewhere with excellent mocktails since you're currently hosting a tenant." Claire laughed. The first real laugh in 2 weeks. "Deal. But nothing too fancy. I'm trying to be careful with money until I know where I stand." "Speaking of which, did you meet with Jennifer yet?" The mention of the divorce lawyer brought Claire back to earth with a thud. "Thursday. I've been trying not to think about it." "Think about it. Ethan doesn't get to walk away clean while you're pregnant with his kid. You need to go in there ready to fight." But Claire didn't feel ready to fight. She felt tired and scared and still somewhat in shock that her life had detonated so completely. The thought of lawyers and negotiations and formalizing the end of her marriage made her want to crawl back into bed and hide. "One thing at a time," she said. "Job first. Then I'll deal with Ethan." She spent the afternoon walking through Prospect Park, her old portfolio tucked under her arm. The park was showing early signs of spring, crocuses pushing through winter-hard ground, trees beginning to bud, the quality of light shifting from winter's harsh clarity to something softer. Claire found herself noticing details she'd overlooked for months. The way a particular path curved to frame a view of the lake, the strategic placement of benches to maximize sun exposure, the careful selection of plantings to ensure year-round interest. She'd forgotten how much she loved this, how observing good landscape design could quiet her mind and center her in her body. For years, she'd walked through parks and public spaces without really seeing them, too preoccupied with managing Ethan's moods or maintaining their social calendar or trying to be the perfect supportive wife. When had she stopped being curious about the world? Her phone rang again. Unknown number, different area code. Claire's heart kicked into high gear as she answered. "Miss Parker, this is Amanda Chen again. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all. I wanted to let you know we'd like to extend an offer. The team was unanimous. We were all very impressed by your work and your approach. I'm emailing over the formal details now, but I wanted to reach out personally. We'd love to have you join us." Claire had to sit down on the nearest bench. Thank you. Yes, absolutely yes." They discussed start date, 2 weeks, salary, more than she'd expected, benefits, comprehensive, including excellent health coverage that would handle the pregnancy. By the time Claire hung up, her hands were shaking with relief and excitement, and the surreal realization that something was actually going right. The email came through while she was still sitting on that bench. She read through the offer letter 3 times, making sure it was real, that the numbers were actually what she thought they were. Then she called Mara. "I got it," she said when Mara picked up. "The job. They offered and I accepted, and I start in 2 weeks." Mara's shriek was loud enough that Claire had to pull the phone away from her ear. "I knew it! I knew you'd kill it! This is exactly what you needed. Proof that your life isn't over just because some narcissistic asshole decided to blow everything up. The health insurance kicks in immediately. I'll be covered for all the pregnancy stuff. Even better. See? You're already rebuilding. You're going to be fine, Claire. Better than fine." Claire wanted to believe that. Wanted to trust that landing this job meant the worst was behind her. But that night, alone in Derek's guest bedroom, the anxiety came creeping back. In 2 weeks, she'd be starting a demanding new job while managing morning sickness and prenatal appointments and the emotional wreckage of her imploded marriage. She'd be showing soon, would have to tell her new employers about the pregnancy, hope they didn't regret hiring her. And underneath everything, the constant awareness that somewhere in Manhattan, Ethan was living his best life without a single consequence for abandoning his pregnant wife. Thursday's meeting with Jennifer Ramos did nothing to improve Claire's mood. The lawyer's office was in a modest building in Midtown, the kind of space that prioritized function over aesthetics. Jennifer herself was a compact woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a handshake like a vice grip. "Tell me everything," she said once they were settled in her office. "Don't leave anything out, even if you think it's not relevant." Claire walked her through the whole story, the marriage, the growing distance, Ethan's increasing obsession with social media and image, the sudden revelation of his affair, his cruel dismissal of the pregnancy. Then, feeling sick, she pulled out her phone and showed Jennifer the Instagram posts. The lawyer's expression grew progressively darker as she scrolled through Ethan's carefully curated narrative of his upgraded life. "He tagged you in these," Jennifer said. "It wasn't a question. Multiple times, even after I blocked him, people kept sending me screenshots. He's been using me as a prop in his story about leveling up his life." That's psychological abuse, deliberate infliction of emotional distress. Jennifer made notes with sharp, angry pen strokes. "And he knows about the pregnancy?" "Yes. He basically said it wasn't his problem, and he didn't want to play house." "Did he say that in writing?" Claire shook her head. "It was in person the day he left. Everything since has been through Instagram, and I'm not tagged anymore since I blocked him." Jennifer leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Okay, here's what we're dealing with. New York is a no-fault divorce state, which means we don't have to prove wrongdoing to dissolve the marriage. However, his abandonment and public humiliation campaign will absolutely factor into questions of child support and potentially spousal support." "I don't want spousal support," Claire said quickly. "I just got a job. I can support myself." "That's admirable, but possibly foolish. You're pregnant with his child. You deserve financial support during the pregnancy and after, especially given that he initiated this divorce and is openly flaunting a new relationship. Don't let pride cost you what you're entitled to. Claire's instinct was to argue, to insist she didn't need anything from Ethan, that she could handle everything on her own. But the practical part of her brain, the part that had been running numbers since the pregnancy test came back positive, knew Jennifer was right. Raising a child in New York City, even with a decent salary, was going to be expensive. "What do I need to do?" she asked. "Document everything, every post, every interaction, every expense. Keep a journal of how his behavior is affecting you emotionally and physically. When's your next OB appointment?" "Next Tuesday." "Good. Make sure they note any stress-related symptoms." We're building a case that shows a pattern of psychological abuse and abandonment. When we file, we're going for full child support, medical expenses, and potentially emotional distress damages. Claire felt like she was planning for war. She'd come into this marriage believing in partnership and compromise, and she was leaving it with a lawyer strategizing how to maximize her settlement from a man who'd treated her like disposable content. "He's going to fight this," Claire said. "He'll paint me as bitter and vindictive, trying to trap him with a baby he doesn't want." "Let him try." The court doesn't care about his Instagram narrative. They care about facts. He's the father. He abandoned you while pregnant. He's financially capable of supporting his child. His social media behavior actually helps us. It shows callousness and lack of regard for your well-being. Over the next week, Claire settled into a strange new rhythm. Days were consumed with wrapping up freelance projects and preparing to start at MDA. Evenings were spent in Derek's apartment, which was slowly starting to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like a home. She painted the guest bedroom a soft gray, hung curtains she'd found at a thrift shop, arranged her books and plants until the space felt like hers. The morning sickness was brutal. Not just mornings, but random waves of nausea that could strike at any time. She kept crackers in her purse, learned to avoid certain smells, developed a complicated relationship with ginger tea. Her body was changing in small ways, breast tender, jeans slightly tighter, a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to touch. And through it all, the constant awareness of social media continuing without her. Mara would occasionally report that Ethan was still posting his perfect life with Sienna, restaurants and events and carefully staged moments of happiness. Claire had stayed blocked, had maintained her digital distance, but the knowledge that the humiliation was ongoing sat like a stone in her chest. "You need to stop asking about his posts," Claire told Mara over dinner the night before her MDA start date. "It's not helping." "I'm keeping tabs on the enemy. Know your opponent." "He's not my opponent. He's just a guy I used to be married to who turned out to be a stranger." Claire pushed noodles around her plate, her appetite spotty at best. "I need to focus on moving forward, not on whatever narrative he's building." "You're right. I'm sorry." Mara reached across the table, squeezing Claire's hand. "I'm just so angry on your behalf. You deserved better." "Yeah, I did." Claire met her friend's eyes. "But I'm getting better now. This job, this apartment, this life I'm building, it's mine, not his. And that matters more than anything he posts online." She believed it more each time she said it. Monday morning, Claire walked into MDA wearing her most professional outfit and a determination to prove she'd been worth the hire. Amanda gave her a tour, introduced her to the team, then brought her to a desk near the windows with a view of the East River. "This is yours," Amanda said. "We're throwing you in the deep end. Hope you're ready to swim." The rooftop garden project was even more complex than Claire had realized. The client was a boutique hotel in Soho, and they wanted a space that could function as both a private event venue and a public garden, with the native plants, sustainable irrigation, and enough visual drama to photograph well. The previous designer had created something technically sound but aesthetically flat, and the client was threatening to pull the contract if they didn't see major improvements. Claire spent her first week immersed in research and revision. She studied the existing plans, identifying where the design fell flat and where it could be pushed further. Slowly, an idea took shape. Instead of treating the rooftop as a traditional garden, what if they created distinct zones that each told a different story? A meadow area with tall grasses and wildflowers, a more formal section with structured plantings, a water feature that collected and recycled rainwater, intimate seating areas tucked into the landscape. She worked late most nights, too absorbed to notice the time, fueled by the creative energy she'd been suppressing for years. This was what she'd missed: the problem-solving, the iterative process of design, the satisfaction of watching an idea evolve from concept to something real and buildable. On Thursday of her second week, Amanda stopped by her desk. "The client wants to see revised concepts. Think you can present next Tuesday?" Claire's stomach dropped. "Present? To the actual client? You're the lead designer on this now. It's your vision they'll be buying into." Amanda's expression was kind but firm. "I know it's fast, but I wouldn't throw you to the wolves if I didn't think you could handle it." That weekend, Claire worked herself into exhaustion preparing the presentation. She created renderings that showed the space in different seasons, detailed planting plans that demonstrated the ecological thinking behind each choice, mood boards that captured the emotional experience she was trying to create. At 14 weeks pregnant, she was finally starting to show, just a small curve that could still be disguised with the right clothes, but the fatigue was relentless. Sunday evening, she stood in Derek's living room, running through her presentation for the 10th time when her phone rang. Unknown number, Manhattan area code. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Claire, it's Marcus, from your old building." The doorman. Claire's chest tightened. "Is everything okay?" "I probably shouldn't be calling, but I thought you should know. Mr. Pierce came by yesterday asking if we'd seen you. He seemed agitated, asked if you'd been back to collect more of your things." "What did you tell him?" "That I hadn't seen you in weeks, but he left something for you at the front desk, an envelope. I can mail it to you if you want to give me an address." Claire's mind raced. Ethan hadn't tried to contact her directly since the day he'd left. What could he possibly want now? "Can you open it? Just tell me what's inside." She heard rustling, then Marcus's voice again. "Looks like legal papers, divorce petition, and a note." "Read me the note?" "You sure?" "Please." Marcus cleared his throat. It says, "Claire, I'm filing for divorce to make this official. I've instructed my lawyer to be fair about asset division, but I want this done quickly and cleanly. I hope you can move forward as easily as I have. The prenup should make things simple. Ethan." The prenup. Claire had forgotten about the prenup. They'd signed it 2 days before the wedding at Ethan's lawyer's insistence. She'd been so in love, so sure their marriage would last forever, that she'd barely read it before scrawling her signature. "Thank you for letting me know, Marcus. Can you mail the envelope to—" She gave him Derek's address, then hung up and immediately called Jennifer Ramos. The lawyer answered on the third ring, sounding annoyed. "This better be important. It's Sunday." "Ethan's filing for divorce. He sent papers. And apparently there's a prenup I need to dig up." "A prenup?" Jennifer's tone sharpened. "You didn't mention a prenup." "I forgot about it. We signed it right before the wedding. I don't even know where my copy is." "Find it, tomorrow. Email me a scan as soon as you do. Prenups can be challenged, especially if they're unconscionable or if circumstances have changed significantly, like say you being pregnant with his child." Claire spent the next hour tearing through the boxes she'd packed from the penthouse, searching for the file folder where she'd kept important documents. She found it at the bottom of a box labeled "Office Stuff," a manila envelope containing the prenup, their marriage license, and other papers from the wedding. The prenup was worse than she remembered. In the event of divorce, it stipulated that each party would leave with only what they'd brought into the marriage, plus a small settlement based on years married. 3 years meant she'd get essentially nothing, maybe $20,000. No spousal support, no claim to anything acquired during the marriage. She'd signed away her future without even realizing it. Claire scanned the document and sent it to Jennifer, then sat on the floor of her bedroom surrounded by boxes and felt the full weight of how thoroughly Ethan had planned his exit. He'd protected his assets before they'd even said their vows, had made sure she'd have no financial recourse when he decided to trade up. The man she'd married had never existed. Or maybe he had, and this was what he'd become, someone who treated love like a business transaction with exit clauses. Her phone buzzed. Jennifer, responding to the scan, "This is bad, but not insurmountable. We'll talk strategy tomorrow. Don't panic." But Claire was already past panic. She was moving into something colder, clearer. Ethan thought he could discard her with a check and a prenup, walk away clean while she dealt with pregnancy and single motherhood alone. He expected her to sign the papers meekly, take her small settlement, disappear from his perfect narrative. She thought about the presentation she'd been preparing, the garden taking shape in her mind. Thought about the job she'd earned on her own merit, the apartment that was becoming a home, the life growing inside her that had nothing to do with Ethan's validation. He'd thrown her away because he thought she was worthless. Small. Forgettable. Claire pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the slight swell there. "I'm going to prove him wrong," she whispered. "I'm going to build something so much better than anything he can buy or post or curate, and he's going to watch me do it." The Tuesday presentation at the boutique hotel started badly. The client, a woman in her 40s named Diane Rothstein, who'd made her fortune in tech, arrived 30 minutes late, immediately announced she only had 45 minutes, and spent the first 10 minutes of Claire's presentation on her phone. Claire pushed through her nervousness, walking Diane through the revised concepts with as much confidence as she could manufacture. She explained the ecological principles, the seasonal interest, the way the design would create both drama and intimacy. Amanda sat in the corner, watching but not intervening. "Stop," Diane said suddenly. "Go back to the meadow section." Claire clicked back to the rendering showing the wild grass and flower area in late summer bloom. "That." Diane set down her phone, leaning forward. "That's what I wanted but couldn't articulate. The other designer kept trying to make everything so controlled, so manicured. This feels alive." Relief flooded through Claire. The meadow area uses all native species that support local pollinators. The grasses will move in the wind, create sound and motion. In spring, it'll be subtle, just green. By late summer, it'll be this explosion of color and texture. Then in fall and winter, the dried grasses and seed heads create architectural interest. "It's perfect." Diane stood, gathering her things. "I'm sold. Let's move forward." "Don't you want to see the rest of the presentation?" Claire asked. "I trust you. If you understand the meadow, you understand the whole vision. How fast can we break ground?" Amanda stepped in, discussing timelines and permits and construction logistics. Claire stood there in slight shock, her carefully prepared presentation cut short by success. She'd spent 2 weeks obsessing over every detail, and the client had bought in within 20 minutes. After Diane left, Amanda turned to Claire with a broad smile. "See? I told you that you could handle it. She's notoriously difficult to please, and you won her over completely. I thought I was bombing when she was on her phone. That's just Diane. She's always multitasking. But when she focuses, it means you've genuinely captured her attention." Amanda checked her watch. "Take the rest of the day. You've earned it. Tomorrow we start on actual construction documents." Claire left the hotel feeling like she was floating. She'd done it, had proven herself in a high-pressure situation, won over a difficult client, demonstrated that she belonged in this role. For the first time since Ethan had walked out, she felt genuinely proud of herself. She was walking toward the subway when she noticed a plant shop she'd never seen before, tucked between two larger storefronts, easy to miss. The window display was stunning, rare ferns and unusual succulents arranged with an artist's eye. On impulse, Claire went inside. The shop was small but packed with specimens, everything from common houseplants to exotic rarities. Classical music played softly in the background, and the air smelled like soil and green growth. Claire wandered the aisles, trailing her fingers over leaves, admiring the careful curation. "Can I help you find something?" A man's voice, quiet and pleasant. Claire turned to find someone she absolutely wasn't expecting. He was tall, dressed simply in dark jeans and a gray Henley, with the kind of understated presence that seemed at odds with the intensity in his eyes. Late 30s, maybe? Dark hair starting to silver at the temples, strong features that didn't quite fit any conventional standard of handsome, but worked together into something arresting. "I'm just looking," Claire said. "I work in landscape architecture. I can't resist a good plant shop." His expression warmed slightly. "Then you came to the right place. We specialize in unusual specimens. Is there a particular ecosystem you're interested in?" They fell into conversation about native plants, about the trend toward meadow gardens and rain gardens, about the importance of designing with ecological function in mind. He was clearly knowledgeable, speaking about plants with genuine passion rather than sales patter. Claire found herself relaxing, enjoying the discussion in a way she hadn't enjoyed talking to anyone outside of work in weeks. "I'm sorry," she said eventually. "I've been monopolizing your time. I should actually buy something or stop taking up space." "You're not taking up space. It's rare to have a customer who actually understands what we're trying to do here. He gestured to the shop. Most people want whatever they've seen on Instagram. You're asking about root systems and soil composition. Claire laughed. Occupational hazard. I just finished presenting a rooftop garden design, and I'm a little deep in plant nerd mode. The best mode to be in. He held out his hand. Adrian Vale. Claire Parker. She shook his hand, noting the calluses on his palm. Not just someone who owned a plant shop, someone who worked in it. They talked for another 20 minutes before Claire finally forced herself to leave, walking out with a rare fern she absolutely didn't need but couldn't resist. Adrian had given her his card, heavy stock, simply printed with the shop's name and a phone number. On the subway home, Claire caught herself smiling at nothing. She'd had an actual conversation with someone who didn't know anything about her situation, who talked to her like she was just a person with interesting thoughts, rather than someone to be pitied or managed. It had felt normal, easy. Her phone buzzed. Text from Mara. Heard the presentation went amazing. Celebratory dinner? Claire texted back. Yes, and I have something to tell you. That evening, over Thai food, Claire told Mara about the presentation, about Diane's approval, about how good it felt to succeed at something entirely separate from the wreckage of her personal life. I'm so proud of you, Mara said. This is exactly what you needed. Proof that you're talented and valuable and completely capable of building a life on your own terms. I also met someone today. Mara's eyebrows shot up. Met someone? Like met someone? Not like that, just a guy who owns a plant shop. We talked about gardens for half an hour. It was nice. Nice like pleasant conversation, nice, or nice like, I'd like to talk to him again, nice? Claire considered. The second one, maybe? I don't know, it's too soon to think about anything like that. I'm still pregnant with my ex-husband's baby and living in a borrowed apartment. But you're thinking about it, which means you're starting to see a future beyond just survival. Mara raised her glass. That's worth celebrating too. They toasted with Claire's water and Mara's wine, and for the first time in weeks, Claire let herself imagine what that future might look like. Not in detail, not with any certainty, just the vague shape of possibility opening up in front of her. The divorce papers arrived 2 days later, formal and cold. Claire read through them with Jennifer on speakerphone, going over every clause, every implication. Ethan wanted a quick, clean divorce with minimal fuss. He was offering exactly what the prenup stipulated: a small settlement, no spousal support, complete financial separation. We're not signing this, Jennifer said flatly. We're going to file a counter-petition, full child support, medical expenses covered, and we're challenging the prenup on the grounds that you signed it under duress and that circumstances have materially changed. Will that work? It's going to be a fight, but you're pregnant with his child, Claire. He doesn't get to walk away clean just because he had you sign a document when you were too in love to protect yourself. The legal battle would be long and ugly. Claire knew that. But sitting in her small Brooklyn apartment, her hand resting on the small swell of her stomach, she felt ready for it. Ethan had counted on her staying passive, accepting his terms, fading quietly into his past. He'd miscalculated. Claire Parker was done being passive, done accepting whatever scraps life handed her. She had a job she loved, friends who had her back, and a future she was building from scratch. And if Ethan thought he'd seen the last of her, he was very, very wrong. The rooftop garden broke ground in early May, and Claire found herself spending long hours on site, coordinating with contractors, and adjusting plans on the fly when reality collided with design. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying, watching her vision take physical form one planted bed at a time. At 18 weeks pregnant, she could no longer hide the bump, and had finally told Amanda and the rest of the team about the baby. Their reaction had surprised her. Instead of concern about her ability to handle the workload, Amanda had simply asked when Claire needed to start maternity leave and how they could structure her projects around that timeline. The other designers had been casually congratulative, then immediately returned to debating irrigation systems. No drama, no judgment, just acceptance that Claire was a professional who happened to also be growing a human. It was such a stark contrast to Ethan's reaction that Claire sometimes had to remind herself that not everyone viewed pregnancy as an inconvenient complication. She was reviewing planting plans on the rooftop one Thursday afternoon when her phone rang. Unknown number, but she was expecting calls from several contractors, so she answered. Claire Parker? A woman's voice, cool and professional. Speaking. This is Vanessa Huang from Elite Events Management. I'm calling because we're coordinating the Met Gala this year, and we received your information through our designer database. We're looking for someone to create floral installations for the event, and your work with native plants and sustainable design caught our attention. Claire's brain stalled. The Met Gala. One of the most high-profile events in New York, where celebrities and designers and cultural figures gathered in a spectacle of fashion and excess. She'd seen photos every year, had watched Ethan obsess over getting tickets, had heard him rant about the social capital that came with an invitation. I'm flattered, Claire managed, but I think you might have the wrong person. I do landscape architecture, not event florals. We're aware. That's specifically what interests us. This year's theme has an environmental focus, and we want installations that make a statement about ecological design. Living walls, sustainable arrangements, pieces that challenge the typical gala aesthetic. Your rooftop garden project has been generating buzz in design circles. We think your approach would be perfect. Claire sat down on a stack of pavers, her mind racing. When would you need a proposal? We're meeting with potential designers next week. Could you come in Tuesday afternoon? She should say no. Should explain that she was 6 months from being a single mother, that she was already stretched thin with her MDA projects, that taking on something this high profile and demanding was impractical. But some part of her, the part that was still angry about being called forgettable, still burning from Ethan's public humiliation, wanted to say yes. Tuesday works, she heard herself say. Email me the details. After she hung up, Claire sat on that rooftop for a long moment, watching the city sprawl below her. The Met Gala. Ethan would absolutely be there if he'd managed to secure tickets. It was exactly the kind of event he lived for, the kind of social currency he craved. The thought of potentially crossing paths with him made her stomach clench. But the thought of creating something beautiful for one of the world's most photographed events, of having her work seen by thousands of people, of proving that she was capable of something extraordinary, that made her pulse quicken with something other than fear. She called Mara on the walk back to the subway. The Met Gala people want to meet with me about doing installations, Claire said without preamble. Mara's shriek was loud enough that several people on the street turned to look. Are you serious? Claire, that's insane. That's amazing. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Maybe? It would be a huge project, high pressure, and Ethan's probably going to be there, which makes everything complicated. So what? You have every right to work that event. More right than he does, actually, since you're being hired for your talent instead of just buying your way in. Mara's voice turned fierce. Don't let him take this opportunity from you. Don't give him that power. Claire knew she was right. But the thought of being in the same space as Ethan and Sienna, of potentially having to watch them pose and preen while cameras flashed, made her want to hide in her apartment until the whole thing was over. I'm 20 weeks pregnant, Claire said. By the time the gala happens in May, I'll be like 7 months along. Huge. Definitely showing. Good. Let him see exactly what he walked away from. Let him see you thriving and successful and creating beautiful things while he's just another rich guy in a tuxedo. The meeting with Elite Events Management the following Tuesday was both terrifying and exhilarating. They wanted large-scale installations that would transform the museum's entrance and main halls, living walls that could be installed temporarily, suspended gardens, dramatic centerpieces using locally sourced materials. The budget was generous, the timeline tight, the exposure invaluable. We're interviewing 3 designers, Vanessa Huang told her, but I'll be honest, your portfolio is exactly what we're looking for. Can you handle a project of this scale while managing your other commitments? Claire thought about the rooftop garden, about the 2 other projects she'd taken on at MDA, about the baby that would be arriving in 4 months. It was too much. Objectively, logically, she should decline. I can handle it, she said. I'll need to bring on an assistant for the installation itself, but I can manage the design and coordination. Perfect. We'll be in touch by end of week. Claire left that meeting feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump without knowing if she'd fly or fall. When the offer email arrived 3 days later, she stared at it for a full minute before calling Amanda. I need to talk to you about something, Claire said when her boss answered. I've been offered a project that would be incredible for my career, but might interfere with my MDA work. I wanted to be upfront before accepting. Amanda listened as Claire explained about the Met Gala, about the scope and timeline and potential conflicts. When Claire finished, there was a long pause. "Take it," Amanda said finally. "This is the kind of opportunity that changes careers. We'll adjust your schedule here, shift some responsibilities. Don't pass this up, Claire." So she accepted, and then spent the next 2 weeks in a state of controlled panic, trying to figure out how to deliver something worthy of the Met Gala, while also managing her pregnancy and her regular job and the slowly accumulating stress of the divorce proceedings. Jennifer had filed their counter-petition, challenging the prenup and demanding full child support. Ethan's lawyer had responded with aggressive pushback, claiming Claire was trying to extort him, that she'd gotten pregnant on purpose to trap him into financial obligation. The accusations were baseless and ugly, but they still hurt, still made Claire question whether fighting was worth the emotional toll. "Don't back down," Jennifer told her during one particularly brutal strategy session. "He wants you to cave. That's his whole game plan. Make this so unpleasant that you'll accept his terms just to make it stop. Don't give him that satisfaction." May arrived with warm weather and the constant pressure of deadlines. The rooftop garden was nearing completion, the installations were coming together in her mind, and Claire's body was changing rapidly. At 24 weeks pregnant, she couldn't ignore it anymore. The bump was pronounced. Her center of gravity shifted, her energy limited. She'd had to buy new clothes, maternity versions of her professional wardrobe that actually fit. It was during a supply run for rare ferns that she found herself back at Adrian's plant shop. She'd been there twice since that first visit, always for legitimate work reasons, always telling herself it was just about the plants. But the truth was more complicated. Adrian Vale had become something like a friend, someone she could talk to about design and ecology without any of the baggage that came with her other relationships. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression shifted, not quite a smile, but a warming. "Claire, I was starting to think you'd found a better supplier." "Never. You have the best ferns in the city." She gestured to her stomach, which was impossible to miss now. "Sorry I haven't been by. Life's been complicated." I can see that." His gaze flicked to her bump, then back to her face. "Congratulations?" "Thank you. It's been an adjustment." She moved through the shop, trailing her fingers over leaves, feeling the familiar calm that came with being surrounded by green growing things. "I'm actually here for a massive order. I'm doing installations for the Met Gala, and I need some very specific specimens." Adrian's eyebrows rose. "The Met Gala? That's impressive." "Or insane. The jury's still out." Claire pulled out her phone, showing him the list of plants she needed. "Can you source these on this timeline?" He studied the list, his expression thoughtful. "Most of them, yes. These 3 might be challenging, but I have contacts. This is for the environmental theme." "How did you know about the theme?" "I pay attention to design news, and the gala's been promoting their ecological focus pretty heavily." He made notes on her list, his handwriting precise. "When do you need delivery?" 2 weeks before the event. They'll need time to acclimate before installation." "That's tight but doable." He looked up, studying her with those intense eyes. "This is a huge opportunity. You must be excited." "Excited and terrified in equal measure." Claire sank into the chair Adrian kept near the counter, her feet already aching from too much standing. "Sorry, pregnancy makes standing an Olympic sport." "Don't apologize. Can I get you water, tea?" The casual kindness of the offer made Claire's throat tight. She'd been so focused on managing everything alone, on proving she didn't need help from anyone, that small gestures of care caught her off guard. "Water would be great, thank you." Adrian disappeared into the back, returning with a glass and a plate of cookies. "My sister makes these. She's convinced everyone in the world is constantly starving." Claire accepted both gratefully. They fell into their usual easy conversation, talking about the installations, about sustainable design, about the challenge of creating beauty while honoring ecological principles. Adrian was opinionated, but never dismissive, pushing back on her ideas in ways that made her think harder, articulate better. "You should come see the rooftop project before the gala," Claire found herself saying. "It's basically done, just waiting for everything to fill in. I think you'd appreciate what we did with the meadow section." Something flickered across Adrian's face. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure. "I'd like that. When works for you?" They made plans for the following Saturday, and Claire left the shop feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She was halfway down the block before she registered what had just happened. She'd invited a man to see her work. Not as a professional courtesy, but because she wanted him there. Because his opinion mattered to her in a way that had nothing to do with contracts or credentials. The realization should have scared her. She was barely divorced, hugely pregnant, building a life from ruins. Getting involved with anyone, even platonically, was a complication she didn't need. But walking through the spring evening with Adrian's plant order confirmed and their Saturday plan set, Claire couldn't quite convince herself to regret it. That Saturday was perfect. Clear skies, mild temperature, the kind of May day that made New York feel magical. Claire met Adrian at the Soho Hotel at noon, leading him up to the rooftop where her garden had transformed a barren concrete expanse into something alive. The meadow grasses were just beginning to establish, still young, but showing the promise of what they'd become. The structured planting beds were lush with early spring growth. The water feature burbled quietly, already attracting birds. It wasn't finished, gardens never really were, but it was unmistakably successful. Adrian walked through the space slowly, stopping to examine plant choices, to test the soil, to appreciate the sightlines she'd created. He didn't speak much, but his attention was complete, focused in a way that made Claire hyper-aware of every design decision she'd made. "This is remarkable," he said finally, standing in the meadow section with the city skyline behind him. "You've created something that feels inevitable, like it's always been here." The compliment landed differently than professional praise. This wasn't a client being satisfied or a colleague being supportive. This was someone who genuinely understood what she'd been trying to achieve, recognizing the work and thought and care that had gone into every choice. "Thank you," Claire said, and her voice came out softer than intended. "That means a lot." They sat on one of the benches she'd specified, looking out over the city. Claire's feet were grateful for the rest, her back aching in the way that had become constant. At 25 weeks pregnant, her body was a constant reminder of the timeline counting down toward motherhood. "Can I ask you something personal?" Adrian said after a moment. "You can ask, I might not answer." "The baby's father, he's not in the picture?" Claire had gotten used to deflecting this question, to giving vague answers that discouraged follow-up. But something about Adrian's quiet presence, about the way he asked without judgment, made her want to tell the truth. "He left when I told him I was pregnant. We were married for 3 years and he walked out the same day I took the test." She kept her eyes on the skyline, unable to look at Adrian while saying it. "He's with someone else now, someone better suited to his lifestyle." "That's his loss." The simplicity of the statement, the absolute conviction in Adrian's voice, made Claire's eyes sting. "You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you created this." Adrian gestured to the garden around them. "I know you think about root systems and ecological function. I know you ask the right questions and listen to the answers. That's enough to know he made a mistake." They sat in silence for a while, surrounded by the garden and the city sounds filtering up from below. Claire felt something shifting inside her, some careful wall she'd built starting to crack. She'd been so focused on being strong, on handling everything alone, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to just be seen, acknowledged, valued, without having to prove anything. "I should probably tell you," Adrian said eventually, "that I'm not just a plant shop owner. That's real. I do run the shop, but it's more of a passion project than a career." Claire looked at him, confused. "Okay?" "I mention it because I don't want you to think I've been hiding something. My family has money, significant money. The shop is what I do because I love it, not because I need to." "Why are you telling me this?" Adrian met her eyes, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "Because I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy your company, and I wanted to be honest about who I am before this goes any further." "Before what goes any further?" "Whatever this is." He gestured between them. "Friendship, maybe? Or something else, eventually? I know your timing is complicated. I know you're managing a lot. But I wanted you to know that I'm interested in you, in getting to know you better without the pretense of plant orders." Claire's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. She was pregnant with another man's baby, barely divorced, living in a borrowed apartment. This was objectively terrible timing for anything resembling romance. And yet, "I don't know what I have to offer right now," she said carefully. "I'm kind of a disaster." "You're not a disaster. You're dealing with a difficult situation with remarkable grace." Adrian's voice was steady, Certain. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just wanted to be clear about my intentions. Your intentions, Claire repeated, and she couldn't help the small smile. That's very formal. I'm a formal person. It's one of my many flaws. They talked for another hour, the conversation ranging from serious to silly and back again. Adrian told her about growing up in a family where money solved every problem except the important ones, about choosing to work with plants because they didn't care about net worth or social status. Claire told him about her architecture background, about the years she'd lost herself in her marriage, about slowly rediscovering who she was outside of being someone's wife. By the time they left the rooftop, something had been established between them. Not a relationship exactly, not yet, but an understanding, a possibility. The Met Gala installations consumed the next 3 weeks. Claire worked with a team of assistants to create the living walls, massive vertical gardens that would frame the museum's entrance, using native plants arranged in patterns that mimicked natural ecosystems. She designed suspended gardens that would hang from the ceiling like floating meadows, centerpieces that combined found objects with living materials, sculptural pieces that blurred the line between art and nature. It was the most ambitious work she'd ever attempted, and at 28 weeks pregnant, it was also the most physically challenging. She had to delegate more than she wanted, trusting her assistants to execute her vision while she focused on coordination and design adjustments. Amanda had been true to her word, shuffling Claire's MDA responsibilities to give her space for the gala project, checking in regularly but never micromanaging. Adrian had become a steady presence in her life. They met for coffee, herbal tea for her, twice a week. Conversations stretching long as they talked about everything and nothing. He came to her apartment one weekend and helped her start setting up the nursery, assembling furniture without complaint while Claire sorted through baby clothes Mara had insisted on buying. You're nesting, Mara observed during one of her frequent visits, watching Claire reorganize the same drawer for the third time. It's very cute and very pregnant of you. But I'm creating organization systems. That's different. Sure it is. Mara settled onto the couch, studying Claire with knowing eyes. So, Adrian, how's that going? It's not going anywhere. We're friends. Friends who have romantic tension so thick you could cut it with a knife? Claire threw a baby sock at her. I'm 7 months pregnant with my ex-husband's baby. There's no romantic tension. There's just friendship and plant talk. Keep telling yourself that. Mara's expression turned serious. But actually, I'm glad you have him. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are, not who they need you to be. The divorce proceedings were getting uglier. Ethan's lawyers were fighting the prenup challenge aggressively, painting Claire as a gold digger who'd gotten pregnant to trap a wealthy man. They were demanding paternity tests, questioning the timeline, implying she'd been unfaithful. It was all baseless, all designed to intimidate and exhaust, but it was working. Claire was tired of fighting, tired of having her character assassinated in legal documents, tired of spending money on lawyers when she should be saving for the baby. We're close to a settlement, Jennifer told her during their latest meeting. They know they're going to lose on child support. The law is clear on that, but they're trying to minimize the amount. I think we can get them to agree to full medical expenses plus substantial monthly support if we drop the prenup challenge and the emotional distress claims. How substantial? Jennifer named a figure that made Claire blink. It was more than she'd expected, enough to make real difference in the baby's quality of life. Not wealth, but security. Take it, Claire said. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want this over. The agreement was finalized 2 weeks before the Met Gala. Ethan would pay child support, cover all medical expenses related to the pregnancy and birth, and contribute to childcare costs. In exchange, Claire dropped all other claims and agreed to minimal custody arrangements. Ethan would have the option of visitation, but wasn't required to take it. Reading between the lines, it was clear he had no intention of being involved in their child's life. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, Claire felt mostly relief. She didn't have to coordinate with him, didn't have to negotiate parenting decisions with someone who fundamentally didn't care. The baby would be hers, fully and completely. She signed the papers in Jennifer's office, her hand steady on the pen. That's it? We're done? Officially divorced as of this signature, the child support arrangement goes into effect when the baby's born. Jennifer studied her across the desk. How are you feeling? Free, Claire said, and meant it. The week of the Met Gala arrived with the intensity of a storm. The installations had to be completed 3 days before the event, giving them time for any necessary adjustments. Claire spent 72 hours essentially living at the museum, supervising every detail, adjusting plants, ensuring everything was perfect. At 29 weeks pregnant, she was a spectacle herself, hugely rounded, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose center of gravity had shifted dramatically. The museum staff treated her with a mixture of respect for her work and concern for her physical state, constantly offering chairs and water. The living walls came together beautifully, massive green tapestries that transformed the entrance into something between a gallery and a forest. The suspended gardens hung like dreams, defying gravity, creating moments of wonder. The centerpieces achieved exactly the balance Claire had wanted: wild and structured, natural and designed, beautiful and thought-provoking. Standing back to view the completed installations on the morning of the gala, Claire felt something shift inside her. She'd created this. While managing pregnancy and divorce and building a new life, she'd somehow also created something extraordinary. Something that would be photographed and discussed and admired by thousands of people. Ethan had called her forgettable, had reduced her to a chapter he was glad to close. Looking at her work transforming one of the world's most famous museums, Claire smiled. "It's perfect," Vanessa Huang said, appearing at her elbow. "Beyond what we imagined. Claire, this is going to be the most talked about aspect of the entire event." "I hope so," Claire said. "I hope everyone sees it." That evening, she went home and tried to rest, knowing the real test would come the next night when the gala opened and her installations were experienced by the guests. She was scheduled to be there for the first few hours, making sure everything functioned properly, ready to handle any issues. And yes, there was a chance she'd see Ethan. But standing in her apartment, looking at the ultrasound photo on her refrigerator and the sketch she'd framed from the rooftop project and the invitation to the Met Gala sitting on her counter, Claire realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Let him see her. Let him see what he'd thrown away, what she'd become in his absence. She was ready. The day of the Met Gala dawned with impossible clarity, the kind of May morning that made Manhattan feel like the center of the universe. Claire woke early, her body refusing sleep despite the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. At 29 weeks pregnant, even rest felt like work. Shifting positions every hour, trips to the bathroom, the baby doing acrobatics against her ribs, as if practicing for some performance she couldn't yet imagine. She stood in front of her closet for a long time, staring at the limited options. The gala wasn't until evening, but she'd need to be there hours early for final checks on the installations. Professional maternity wear was one thing. Finding something appropriate for one of the world's most photographed events while 7 months pregnant was another challenge entirely. Her phone buzzed. "Mara, right on schedule." "Tell me you're not panicking," Mara said without greeting. "I'm not panicking. I'm strategically concerned about wardrobe choices." "Which is rich person speak for panicking. I'm coming over. Don't move." Mara arrived 40 minutes later with Jess in tow, both of them carrying garment bags and matching expressions of determination. They'd clearly been plotting. "Okay," Jess announced, hanging the bags on Claire's bedroom door. "We knew you'd try to wear something boring and professional, so we took matters into our own hands. I was going to wear the black dress. The black tent that makes you look like you're hiding? Absolutely not." Mara unzipped the first bag, revealing a deep emerald gown that made Claire's breath catch. "You're going to wear this, look stunning, and remind everyone who sees you that pregnancy doesn't mean invisible." The dress was beautiful, empire waist to accommodate her bump, flowing fabric that would move elegantly, a neckline that was sophisticated without being severe. It was also clearly expensive, way beyond what Claire could justify spending. "I can't afford this," she protested. "It's a gift, from both of us." Jess's tone left no room for argument. "You created something extraordinary for this event. You deserve to look extraordinary too." "And before you start with the 'but I'm pregnant' excuse," Mara added, "pregnancy is gorgeous. You're literally growing a human while also creating art. That's powerful. Own it." They spent the next hour getting Claire ready with the focused efficiency of a military operation. Hair styled in loose waves, makeup subtle but deliberate, the dress fitting perfectly over her curved belly. When Claire finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she looked like someone who belonged, confident, elegant, glowing with something beyond pregnancy hormones. Perfect, Jess declared. Now let's get you to that museum before you start overthinking. The Met was controlled chaos when Claire arrived at 3 o'clock. Staff rushed through final preparations, security ran through protocols, florists made last-minute adjustments to traditional arrangements that would complement Claire's living installations. Vanessa Huang spotted her immediately, relief flooding her features. Thank goodness you're here. We had a minor irrigation issue with the west wall, but I think we've got it handled. Come see. Claire followed her through the museum, moving with the careful balance that had become second nature. The installations looked even better than she'd dared hope. The living walls lush and dramatic, the suspended gardens casting intricate shadows, every element working together to transform the space into something between nature and art. The irrigation issue was minor, easily fixed with a quick adjustment. Claire walked through each installation one more time, checking every detail, making tiny refinements that probably no one else would notice but that mattered to her professional pride. By 5 o'clock, with guests set to arrive in an hour, everything was perfect. You should stay, Vanessa said. At least for the beginning. The designer should be here when people experience the work. Claire had planned to leave before the actual event started, to avoid any chance of running into Ethan and Sienna. But standing among her installations, feeling the baby kick against her ribs as if in encouragement, she found herself nodding. I'll stay for a bit, she said, just to see the initial reactions. She positioned herself near the entrance, where the living walls created a dramatic threshold between the street and the museum. From here, she could watch guests arrive without being in the main flow of traffic, could observe without participating. The red carpet assembled itself outside like a stage set, barriers erected, photographers positioning themselves, the particular energy that came with exclusive events building in the air. Claire felt separate from it, observer rather than participant, which was exactly how she wanted it. Until a town car pulled up and Adrian Vale stepped out. Claire's brain momentarily short-circuited. Adrian was wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, moving with quiet confidence through the crowd and heading directly for the museum entrance. This wasn't someone who'd gotten lucky with tickets. This was someone who belonged here, who navigated this world with the ease of familiarity. He spotted her immediately, his expression shifting from public neutrality to something warmer as he approached. Claire. He took in her dress, her careful styling, and smiled. You look beautiful. What are you doing here? The question came out more blunt than she intended. You said you had family money, but you didn't mention you had Met Gala access. I told you my family has significant wealth. This is part of that world. He studied her face, reading her confusion. I should have been more specific. My family is the Vale family, tech fortune, several foundations, the usual philanthropic circuit. Claire's mind raced, placing the name. Vale Technologies had been one of the biggest success stories of the early internet era. The family was known for both their wealth and their relative privacy. They donated millions but avoided the spotlight, did important work without the need for constant recognition. You let me complain about entitled rich people, Claire said slowly, while being one of the most entitled rich people in New York. I'm not entitled. I just happen to have money I didn't earn. Adrian's voice was mild, but there was something careful in his expression. Does it change things? That I have resources I didn't mention? Claire thought about Ethan, about how he'd weaponized wealth and status, used them to elevate himself while diminishing her. But Adrian had sat on a Brooklyn rooftop garden helping her assemble nursery furniture, had talked to her about plants and design without ever pulling rank or flaunting resources. The money hadn't been relevant because he hadn't made it relevant. No, she said finally, it doesn't change things. But you could have told me. I'm telling you now. I'm also asking if you'll let me stay with you this evening. He gestured to the space around them. I'd like to experience your work the way you intended it, and I'd like you to have someone in your corner if things get complicated. The offer landed with unexpected weight. Claire had gotten so used to managing everything alone, to being the only one who could be counted on, that the idea of someone choosing to stand with her felt almost foreign. Things might get very complicated, she warned. My ex-husband is probably going to be here, with his new girlfriend. It could be awkward. Then let it be awkward. You created something remarkable. You deserve to be here when people see it. Adrian's voice was steady, certain. Let me be here with you. Before Claire could respond, the first wave of guests began arriving. Celebrities in custom gowns, designers in architectural creations, cultural figures who treated the red carpet like performance art. The photographers went into a frenzy, cameras flashing in rapid-fire bursts, voices calling out for attention. And then the reactions to her installations started. The first guests through the entrance stopped almost involuntarily when they saw the living walls. Claire watched expressions shift from jaded sophistication to genuine wonder as people registered what they were seeing. Not traditional florals, but actual ecosystems, thriving gardens growing vertically, defying expectation. Is this real? She heard someone ask. It's all living plants, another voice answered. Native species, completely sustainable. It's genius. The suspended gardens drew similar responses, people pausing to photograph them, to marvel at how something so organic could seem to float. Claire's centerpieces were being examined like art installations, guests leaning in to study the details, the way she'd combined found objects with growing things. This is incredible, a woman in an elaborate feathered gown said to her companion. This is what the gala should always be, making you think, not just showing off. Adrian stood beside Claire, not touching her, but close enough that she felt his presence like warmth. They love it, he said quietly. You're giving them something they didn't know they needed. More guests flooded in, the energy building as the museum filled with Manhattan's elite. Claire spotted celebrities she recognized from movies, designers whose work she'd studied, cultural figures who shaped conversations. And they were all moving through her installations, experiencing her vision, being changed by spaces she'd created. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. She was watching a particularly dramatic entrance, an actress in a gown that appeared to be made entirely of recycled materials. When she saw them, Ethan and Sienna, stepping out of a car that probably cost more than Claire's annual salary. Sienna looked exactly like her Instagram presence, polished to impossible perfection in a silver gown that caught every flash, hair styled in elaborate waves, makeup applied with professional precision. She moved like someone accustomed to cameras, angling herself for the best shots, smiling with practiced ease. Ethan wore a custom tuxedo, his hand possessive on Sienna's waist, his expression radiating satisfaction. This was what he'd wanted, to be here, to be seen, to be part of this exclusive world. He'd probably been planning this for months, pulling strings and calling in favors to secure invitations. Claire felt Adrian's hand settle lightly on her lower back, a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone. That's him? Adrian asked, his voice carefully neutral. That's him. They watched Ethan and Sienna work the red carpet, posing for photos, playing to the cameras. Ethan was in his element, clearly thrilled to be here, to be photographed with a woman who looked like she belonged in this world. He'd finally achieved the aesthetic he'd always wanted, the perfect girlfriend, the exclusive event, the validation of being somewhere that mattered. Then they walked through the entrance into the museum. Claire saw the exact moment Ethan registered the living walls. His stride faltered, his expression shifting from smug satisfaction to confusion. Sienna was too busy checking her phone to notice the installations, but Ethan stopped, staring at the massive vertical gardens with something that looked almost like recognition. He pulled out his phone, typing quickly, and Claire's own phone buzzed in her clutch. Even though she'd kept him blocked, someone, probably a mutual acquaintance, had tagged her in a post. Against her better judgment, she checked it. Ethan had posted a photo of the living wall with the caption, "Incredible installations at the Met Gala tonight. The environmental theme is really making a statement. Hashtag Met Gala. Hashtag eco-luxury. Hashtag green design." No mention of the designer. No acknowledgement of the work involved. Just Ethan inserting himself into the moment, using her creation as content for his own social media presence. "He has no idea you designed this," Adrian said, reading over her shoulder. "No. Why would he? He never paid attention to my work when we were married. Why would he start now?" More guests were arriving, the museum filling with the peculiar energy of exclusive events, everyone performing sophistication while secretly checking to see who else was there, who was wearing what, who was being photographed with whom. Claire spotted designers she admired, celebrities whose work she respected, people who actually contributed something meaningful to the world beyond carefully curated Instagram feeds. And she spotted them noticing her installations, really noticing, stopping to study them, pulling out phones to photograph them, asking staff who'd designed them. Vanessa appeared at Claire's elbow, her expression bright with triumph. People are asking for you. Major designers, museum board members, people who could commission significant projects. You should make yourself available. I'm 7 months pregnant in a fancy dress, Claire said. I'm not exactly networking material. You're the designer of the most talked about aspect of this entire event. Trust me, they don't care about the pregnancy. They care about the talent. Vanessa gestured to a woman in an elegant black gown who was studying the suspended gardens with intense focus. That's Miranda Chen. She's on 3 different museum boards and she's been asking who designed the installations. Come on. Before Claire could protest, Vanessa was guiding her forward, Adrian following at a respectful distance. Miranda Chen turned as they approached, her eyes sharp and assessing. You're the designer, Miranda said. Not a question. Claire Parker. Yes, these are my installations. They're extraordinary. I've been to 100 galas, and I've never seen anything that made me actually stop and think. Miranda gestured to the suspended gardens. The way you've used native species, the ecological statement combined with pure aesthetic impact, it's exactly what we need more of in public spaces. They talked for 10 minutes, Miranda asking detailed questions about Claire's design philosophy, her approach to sustainability, her other projects. By the time the conversation ended, Claire had a business card and an invitation to submit a proposal for a museum courtyard redesign. See, Vanessa said as Miranda walked away, this is how careers change. One perfect project at the right moment. More introductions followed, a steady stream of people who wanted to discuss the installations, to understand the thinking behind them, to explore potential collaborations. Claire found herself in the surreal position of networking at the Met Gala while visibly pregnant, talking about ecological design with some of the most influential people in New York's cultural scene. Adrian stayed close but not intrusive, occasionally bringing her water, providing a steady presence that made the social performance easier. He seemed to know half the people there, moving through this world with quiet ease, but he never tried to take over or speak for her, just stood nearby, a reminder that she had support if she needed it. It was during one of these conversations, discussing a potential green roof project with a developer who owned half of the Upper West Side, that Claire saw Ethan approaching. He'd finally figured it out. Probably asked someone who designed the installations, been told her name, done the mental math that seemed to be causing his smile to crack at the edges. Sienna was nowhere in sight, likely off being photographed with someone more Instagram relevant. Claire, Ethan said, his voice carrying that false warmth he used at parties. This is unexpected. I didn't know you were working this event. I designed the environmental installations, Claire said evenly. All of them. She watched him process that, saw him trying to reconcile the wife he'd dismissed as boring and forgettable with the designer who'd created the most talked-about element of the gala. His gaze dropped to her stomach, to the unmistakable evidence of the pregnancy he'd abandoned, then back to her face. Congratulations, he managed. On the installations. They're very impressive. Thank you. The silence stretched awkward and heavy. The developer Claire had been talking to made a polite excuse and drifted away, sensing the tension. Adrian remained exactly where he was, his presence a quiet wall of support. Ethan's eyes flicked to Adrian, then back to Claire. I didn't realize you'd moved on so quickly. I didn't move on. I moved forward. Claire kept her voice level, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. There's a difference. Right, well... Ethan shifted his weight, uncomfortable in a way Claire had never seen him. The installations really are impressive. I always knew you were talented, even if we weren't right for each other. The revisionism was breathtaking. He'd called her forgettable, had publicly humiliated her, had reduced their entire marriage to a mistake he was glad to correct. And now he was standing here pretending he'd always valued her talent, always recognized her worth. You didn't know anything about my talent, Claire said quietly. You never asked about my work, never looked at my designs, never cared about what I created. You only cared about how I made you look. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not fair. I supported your career. You tolerated it when it didn't interfere with your schedule. There's a difference. Claire felt the baby kick, as if reminding her to stay calm. But it doesn't matter anymore. We're divorced. You got exactly what you wanted. Your freedom, your perfect girlfriend, your curated life. I hope it makes you happy. It does, Ethan said too quickly. Sienna and I are very happy. We're actually talking about getting engaged soon, moving to the next level. Claire wondered if he expected her to be hurt by that, to show some flicker of jealousy or regret. Instead, she felt nothing but tired pity for Sienna, who was about to discover what Claire had learned too late, that Ethan's love was conditional, performance-based, only as good as your last Instagram post. I wish you both the best, Claire said, and meant it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have people to talk to. She turned away from him, felt Adrian's hand find the small of her back again, grounding her. Behind them, she heard Ethan making some awkward departure comment, but she didn't turn around. Didn't give him the attention he was clearly hoping for. You okay? Adrian asked quietly. Surprisingly, yes. Claire let out a long breath. I thought seeing him would hurt more, but mostly I just feel relieved. Relieved that I'm not trapped in that life anymore. The evening continued in a blur of conversations and introductions. Claire met with board members and designers and cultural figures who were genuinely interested in her work. She watched people experience her installations with wonder and appreciation. She felt the baby move and kick and remind her of everything she had to look forward to. And through it all, she was aware of Ethan and Sienna circulating through the party, taking photos, working their way through the social hierarchy. They looked perfect together, beautiful people in beautiful clothes at a beautiful event. The kind of couple that generated Instagram engagement and envious comments. But Claire noticed things she doubted Ethan did. The way Sienna's smile never quite reached her eyes. The way she kept checking her phone, monitoring her social media metrics in real time. The way Ethan's hand on her waist looked less like affection and more like possession, like he was displaying an acquisition rather than touching a partner. She'd been that woman once, measuring her worth by how well she accessorized Ethan's image. Thank God she'd escaped before losing herself completely. It was nearly 10 o'clock when Vanessa found Claire again, this time with a man in his 60s wearing an impeccably tailored tuxedo and an expression of sharp intelligence. Claire, I want you to meet someone. This is Robert Ashford, director of the Parks Department. Robert, this is Claire Parker, the designer behind tonight's installations. Robert Ashford studied Claire with the focused attention of someone who saw past surfaces to substance. Ms. Parker, I've been looking at your work all evening. Vanessa tells me you're also responsible for the Soho rooftop garden that's been getting attention in design publications. Yes, that's my project through Metropolitan Design Associates. I'm going to be direct because I don't believe in wasting time. The city is planning a major initiative to create green spaces in underserved neighborhoods. We're looking for designers who understand ecological function, who can work within tight budgets, who care more about impact than prestige. He pulled out a business card. I'd like you to come in and discuss a potential pilot project in the South Bronx. It would be challenging work, probably not as glamorous as this, but it would matter. Claire took the card, her hands trembling slightly. The Parks Department, citywide initiative, work that would actually improve people's lives instead of just creating Instagram moments. I'd love to discuss it, she said. Thank you for the opportunity. After Robert walked away, Adrian pulled Claire into a quiet corner, away from the main flow of the party. You're collecting opportunities tonight like they're going out of style. I know. It's surreal. Claire leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Her feet ached, her back hurt. The baby was doing gymnastics against her ribs. But she was also humming with accomplishment, with the validation of being recognized for her actual work. You should probably go home soon, Adrian said gently. You've been on your feet for hours. Miss, I should check the installations one more time. Make sure everything's still functioning properly. I'll check them. You've done enough for one night. He studied her face, reading the exhaustion she was trying to hide. Let me call you a car. Adrian, Claire, you've proven everything you needed to prove tonight. You've shown everyone here that you're talented and professional and capable of extraordinary work. Now take care of yourself and that baby. She wanted to argue, to insist she could handle more. but her body was staging a quiet rebellion. Every muscle aching, the fatigue pressing down like physical weight. And the truth was, she'd achieved what she'd come here to do. Her work had been seen and appreciated. She'd collected contacts and opportunities that could shape her career for years. She'd faced Ethan without falling apart. Okay, she agreed, but I need to see the installations one more time first. I just need to know they're perfect before I leave. They walked through the museum together, Claire checking each installation with professional thoroughness. Everything was functioning flawlessly. The irrigation systems working, the plants thriving under the artificial lighting, every element exactly as she'd designed it. Guests were still stopping to photograph them, to marvel at them, to experience the wonder of nature in an unexpected context. Near the suspended gardens, Claire spotted Ethan and Sienna. They were posing for photos beneath one of her creations, Sienna angling herself for the best light while Ethan's hand stayed possessive on her waist. They looked like they belonged in a magazine spread, all polished surfaces and careful composition. But Claire noticed something else. She noticed that while Sienna smiled for the cameras, her eyes kept darting to other people, tracking who was getting more attention, who was being photographed more frequently. She noticed that Ethan's smile had a tight quality around the edges, attention that suggested the evening wasn't going exactly as he'd hoped. She noticed that other guests were giving them polite attention, but not genuine interest. They were beautiful, but ultimately unimportant, decorative rather than substantial. They look miserable, Adrian observed quietly. They look perfect, Claire corrected. But perfection is exhausting. Trust me, I spent 3 years trying to maintain it. As if sensing their observation, Ethan looked up. His eyes met Claire's across the crowded space, and something complicated flickered across his face. Not quite regret, but maybe recognition. An acknowledgement that the woman he'd discarded had somehow ended up mattering more than the life he'd built without her. Claire held his gaze for a long moment, then deliberately turned away. He wasn't worth her energy anymore. Wasn't worth even the minimal attention she'd just given him. "I'm ready to go home now," she told Adrian. The car Adrian called was absurdly luxurious, probably cost more than Claire's monthly rent just for the ride. She sank into the leather seats with a groan of relief. Her feet finally released from the torture of heels, her body settling into rest. "Thank you," she said as they pulled away from the museum, "for being there tonight, for staying with me. I wanted to be there. I wanted to see you in your element." Adrian's voice was quiet in the dim interior of the car. "You were magnificent, Claire. Confident and talented and completely yourself. It was remarkable to witness." She felt tears prick her eyes, pregnancy hormones and exhaustion, and the release of tension she'd been carrying all evening. "I was terrified the whole time. But fear and courage aren't opposites. You can be terrified and still show up, still do the work, still claim your space." He reached over, taking her hand. "That's what makes it brave." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, Manhattan streaming past the windows in a blur of lights and late-night energy. Claire's phone kept buzzing with notifications, probably social media mentions, messages from contacts she'd made, the digital evidence that her work had made an impact. She ignored all of it, too tired to care about metrics or engagement or online validation. The work spoke for itself. People had experienced her installations in person, had been moved and impressed and inspired. That mattered more than any number of Instagram likes. When the car pulled up outside her Brooklyn apartment, Adrian walked her to the door despite her protest that he didn't need to. "Tonight was important," he said as they stood in the hallway outside her apartment, "not just professionally, but personally. You faced your ex-husband while 7 months pregnant with his child, and you held your own. You were gracious and confident, and you didn't let him diminish you. That's powerful, Claire. I had help. You were there. I was there to watch. You did all the hard work yourself." He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her forehead with careful tenderness. "Get some rest. You've earned it." After he left, Claire let herself into the apartment and immediately stripped off the beautiful dress, trading it for soft pajamas. She washed her face, releasing her hair from its careful styling, letting herself become just Claire again instead of Claire the designer at the Met Gala. In bed, she pulled out her phone and finally looked at the notifications. Social media was exploding with photos of her installations. Design blogs were already posting articles about the environmental theme. People were asking who'd created the living walls and suspended gardens. And there, among all the praise and recognition, was a post from Ethan. He'd shared a photo of Sienna posing near one of Claire's centerpieces, with a caption about how the gala had exceeded his expectations, how the evening had been unforgettable, how grateful he was to experience such artistry. Still no mention of who'd designed it, still inserting himself into the narrative without acknowledging her work. Claire stared at the post for a long moment, feeling the old hurt try to surface. Then she did something she'd never done before. She commented directly on his post, her first interaction with his social media in months. "Thank you for appreciating the installations. It took months of work to bring that vision to life." Claire Parker, lead designer. Simple, professional, impossible to ignore. She hit post before she could second-guess herself, then turned off her phone and settled into bed. The baby kicked once, twice, as if celebrating. Claire pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the life growing there, the future taking shape inside her body. Tomorrow there would be follow-up meetings and new opportunities and the continued work of building her career. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to balance prestigious projects with preparing for motherhood. Tomorrow she'd have to navigate the complicated reality of being a single parent with an ex-husband who wanted nothing to do with his child. But tonight, she'd proven something to herself, and to everyone who doubted her. She'd created beauty and meaning. She'd stood in a space that had once seemed impossible to reach, and held her own. She'd faced the man who'd tried to diminish her and walked away stronger. That was enough. More than enough. Claire fell asleep with her hand on her stomach and a small smile on her face, dreaming of gardens that grew in unexpected places, of beauty that persisted despite difficult conditions, of life that found a way to thrive even when the odds seemed impossible. The comment Claire had left on Ethan's post detonated overnight like a quiet bomb. By morning, it had accumulated hundreds of likes and replies, people congratulating her on the installations, asking about her other work, tagging design publications and architecture firms. Ethan had deleted the entire post by 8 a.m., but screenshots had already circulated, the internet's permanent memory preserving his attempt to claim proximity to her work without acknowledging her role. Claire woke to her phone buzzing with interview requests, commission inquiries, and messages from people she hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanting to reconnect. The validation should have felt satisfying, but mostly she felt exhausted. Her body was heavy with pregnancy, and the aftermath of yesterday's long hours on her feet, every muscle protesting movement. She was making tea when Mara called, her voice bright with victory. "Have you seen the design blogs? You're everywhere. Rising star designer, the environmental vision behind the Met Gala. Claire Parker's installations steal the show." "This is huge, Claire. Career-changing huge." "I saw some of it." Claire settled carefully onto the couch, her body grateful for rest. "It's a lot to process." And Ethan deleting his post? Chef's kiss? Everyone's talking about how he tried to take credit without mentioning you. He looks like such an ass. Claire should have felt triumphant about that, but instead she just felt tired of the whole dynamic. Ethan had spent months using her as a prop in his narrative of upgrade and improvement. Now that narrative was backfiring, revealing him as someone who'd discarded a talented partner for Instagram aesthetics. But engaging with that story, even as the victor, meant staying connected to it. "I don't want to make this about him," Claire said. "I want it to be about the work, about what comes next." Fair enough. So what does come next? That was the question that had been circling Claire's mind since she'd woken up. She had the Parks Department meeting to prepare for, several commission inquiries to follow up on, and the small matter of giving birth in approximately 10 weeks. The opportunities spreading in front of her were extraordinary, but they were also demanding at a time when her life was about to become infinitely more complicated. The doorbell rang before she could answer Mara. Claire hauled herself off the couch, wondering who would be visiting on a Sunday morning, and opened the door to find Adrian holding a bag from her favorite bakery and wearing an expression of careful concern. "I'm going to let you go," Claire told Mara. "Adrian just arrived with what looks like bagels." "Adrian who stayed with you all evening at the gala? That Adrian?" Mara's voice carried entirely too much knowing amusement. "Tell him I said he's a keeper." After hanging up, Claire led Adrian inside, accepting the bagel bag with genuine gratitude. "You didn't have to bring breakfast. I wanted to check on you. Yesterday was intense, and I know you were exhausted by the end. He followed her to the kitchen, moving with the easy familiarity of someone who'd been here before. "How are you feeling?" "Sore?" "Tired." Overwhelmed by the amount of attention the installations are getting. Claire pulled out plates, the domestic normalcy of the moment oddly grounding. "Everyone wants interviews or meetings or to discuss potential projects. It's exactly what I should want, but it also feels like a lot. You don't have to say yes to everything. You're allowed to be selective, especially with a baby coming." Adrian spread cream cheese on a bagel with careful precision. "What do you actually want, Claire? Not what you think you should want. What matters to you?" It was such a simple question, but it hit Claire with unexpected force. For so long, she'd been focused on survival, getting through the divorce, securing income, proving she could manage alone. She'd stopped thinking about what she actually wanted her life to look like beyond just functional. "I want to do work that matters," she said slowly. "Projects that improve people's lives, not just create photo opportunities for Instagram. I want to be a good mother, and I want—" She hesitated, not sure how to articulate the rest. "You want what?" Adrian's voice was gentle, patient. "I want to build something real, a life that's mine, not a performance for anyone else. A life where I'm valued for who I actually am instead of how well I accessorize someone's image." Claire met his eyes across the small kitchen table. "I spent 3 years being Ethan's supporting character. I don't ever want to be that again." "Then don't be. You've already proven you're the lead in your own story. Last night, watching you at the gala, you commanded that space, Claire. You were confident and talented and completely yourself. That's who you are. Don't let anyone reduce you to less than that." They ate breakfast together in comfortable silence, the morning sun streaming through Claire's apartment windows and catching on the plants she'd arranged throughout the space. After Adrian left, with plans to have dinner later that week, Claire spent the afternoon responding to emails and setting up meetings. She was selective, following Adrian's advice, choosing opportunities that aligned with actual goals rather than just accepting everything out of gratitude or fear. The Parks Department meeting was scheduled for Wednesday. The museum board member wanted to meet Thursday. A design publication requested an interview for Friday. All manageable, all exciting, all pointing toward a future that felt increasingly possible. Monday morning brought a development Claire hadn't anticipated. She was reviewing planting specifications at her MDA desk when Amanda appeared, her expression carefully neutral in a way that suggested she was managing strong emotions. "Can we talk in my office?" Claire followed, her mind racing through potential issues. Had a client complained? Had there been problems with one of her projects? Had the firm decided that her growing profile conflicted with their team-based approach? Amanda closed the door and gestured for Claire to sit. "I'm going to cut to the chase. Your work at the Met Gala has generated significant attention for the firm. We've had 3 major clients reach out specifically requesting you for upcoming projects. The partners have been discussing how to handle your growing individual profile." Claire's stomach clenched. "Handle it how?" "By promoting you to senior landscape architect with the option to take on high-profile projects under your own name while still being affiliated with MDA." Amanda smiled, the careful neutrality breaking into genuine warmth. "Basically, we want to support your success instead of trying to contain it. You'd have more autonomy, better compensation, and the resources of the firm behind you when you need them." The offer was staggering. Claire had been with MDA for barely 3 months, and they were already offering her the kind of position that typically took years to achieve. It was validation on a level she'd barely dared to imagine. "What about the baby?" Claire asked carefully. "I'm due in 10 weeks. That's going to mean maternity leave, reduced availability. We've already factored that in. You take whatever leave you need, come back at whatever capacity works for you, and we'd structure projects around your schedule. We're not interested in burning out our talent, Claire. We're interested in building long-term relationships with exceptional designers." Amanda leaned forward, her expression intent. "You're exceptional. We want to keep you, so tell us what you need to make that work." Claire spent the rest of the day in a daze of negotiations and planning. By evening, she'd signed a new contract that would take effect after her maternity leave, offering her both security and freedom in ways she'd never experienced in her professional life. She was building something real, something sustainable, something that honored both her talent and her impending motherhood. The Parks Department meeting Wednesday exceeded even her optimistic expectations. Robert Ashford walked her through the initiative, creating green spaces in neighborhoods that had been systematically deprived of nature, using design to improve both environmental conditions and community well-being. It was exactly the kind of work Claire had always wanted to do, but never thought she'd have the opportunity to pursue. "We're starting with a pilot project in the South Bronx," Robert explained, spreading plans across the conference table. "There's a vacant lot that's been an eyesore for years. We want to transform it into a community garden and gathering space, something that serves the neighborhood's actual needs instead of just looking good in renderings." "What's the budget?" Claire asked, already mentally sketching possibilities. Robert named a figure that was modest by Manhattan standards, but substantial enough to do real work. "We need someone who can create impact without excessive cost. Someone who understands that this isn't about prestige, it's about service." "I'd be honored to be part of this," Claire said. "When can we start?" They spent 2 hours discussing vision and logistics and timeline. By the time Claire left, she'd committed to the pilot project with the understanding that if it succeeded, more would follow. It would mean working closely with community members, adapting designs to actual needs, creating spaces that prioritized function and accessibility over aesthetics. It was the opposite of the Met Gala's glamorous exclusivity, and Claire wanted it more than she'd wanted any project in her career. She was walking to the subway, still buzzing with excitement about the Parks Department work, when her phone rang. Unknown number, Manhattan area code. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Claire Parker?" A woman's voice, hesitant and young. "Yes. Who's calling?" "This is Sienna Rossi. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the Met Gala contact list." A pause, filled with audible breathing. "I wanted to talk to you about Ethan." Claire stopped walking, causing someone behind her to mutter an annoyed "excuse me" as they swerved around her. "I don't think we have anything to discuss about Ethan. Please, just 5 minutes. I need to ask you something, and you're the only person who would actually understand." Sienna's voice cracked slightly. "Please, Claire. I'm asking as one woman to another." Against every instinct telling her to hang up, Claire found a bench and sat down. 5 minutes, that's all." "Did he ever make you feel like you were crazy, like your concerns weren't real?" The questions tumbled out rushed and desperate. "Did he criticize everything you did while making it seem like he was just trying to help you be better?" Claire's chest tightened with recognition. She remembered Ethan's subtle put-downs, the way he'd positioned himself as the authority on everything from her wardrobe to her career choices, the way he'd made her doubt her own perceptions while insisting he had her best interests at heart. "Yes," Claire said quietly. "He did. I thought I was going crazy. Everyone sees us together and thinks we're perfect. We look perfect in photos. We go to the right places. We know the right people. But he's so controlling, Claire. He monitors my Instagram constantly, tells me which poses work and which don't, gets angry if I talk to other men at parties. And if I complain, he says I'm being ungrateful, that he's just trying to help me build my brand." Claire listened as Sienna described a relationship that sounded horrifyingly familiar, the love bombing followed by criticism, the public displays of affection paired with private control, the sense of being more object than partner. She'd lived this story, had barely escaped with her sense of self intact. "Why are you telling me this?" Claire asked. "Because I saw you at the gala. You were pregnant and successful, and you looked at him like he didn't matter anymore, like you'd moved past him completely." Sienna's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I want to know how you did it, how you got free." "I stopped trying to be who he wanted me to be. I stopped measuring my worth by his approval." Claire pressed her free hand against her stomach, feeling the baby move. "It wasn't easy. It still isn't easy. But I'd rather be alone in myself than partnered and pretending." "He talks about you sometimes," Sienna said, "when he drinks too much, says you were boring but stable, says he should have tried harder to make it work. Then he looks at me like he's already planning his exit strategy." The confession hung heavy between them. Claire felt an unexpected surge of sympathy for this woman she'd spent months envying and resenting. Sienna wasn't the villain in this story. She was just the next person caught in Ethan's cycle of idealization and devaluation. "You should leave him," Claire said bluntly, "before he leaves you. And he will leave you, Sienna. As soon as someone shinier comes along, or you stop being useful to his image, he'll discard you exactly like he discarded me. Don't waste years trying to be enough for someone who's fundamentally incapable of valuing anyone but himself. Sienna was quiet for a long moment. Everyone will think I'm ungrateful. That I threw away a relationship with someone successful and attractive because I couldn't handle it. Let them think that. Their opinions don't pay your rent or protect your mental health. You have to decide what you value more, other people's perception of your relationship or your actual well-being. After they hung up, Claire sat on that bench for a while longer, processing the conversation. Part of her felt vindicated. Ethan's perfect new relationship was apparently just as hollow as their marriage had been. But mostly, she just felt sad for everyone caught in the orbit of people who treated love like a performance review, who valued image over substance. She'd escaped that, built something real from the ruins, and now she needed to keep moving forward instead of looking back. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity and preparation. Claire worked with the Parks Department on initial designs for the South Bronx project, balancing their vision with community input sessions that revealed what the neighborhood actually needed. She met with the museum board about a long-term installation. She gave interviews to design publications, carefully framing her work in terms of ecological impact rather than personal triumph. And she prepared for the baby with increasing urgency as her due date approached. The nursery came together piece by piece, a crib that Mara had insisted on buying, a changing table from Jess, a rocking chair that had been Claire's grandmother's. Adrian helped paint the walls a soft sage green, the two of them working in comfortable silence broken by easy conversation. Their relationship had shifted into something Claire couldn't quite define but didn't want to label. They had dinner twice a week, spent weekends together working on projects or just talking, existed in each other's lives with increasing intimacy. Adrian had kissed her exactly once since the gala, a gentle goodnight kiss after a dinner where they'd talked for 4 hours, and then stepped back, giving her space to process. "I'm not going anywhere," he'd said when she'd tried to explain her complicated feelings. "I'm not Ethan. I don't need you to perform or prove anything. I just enjoy being with you, Claire. Whatever that looks like is fine with me." At 36 weeks pregnant, Claire was enormous and uncomfortable and increasingly desperate for the baby to arrive. She'd officially started maternity leave from MDA, wrapped up what she could on the Parks project, and shifted into a strange liminal space where all she could do was wait. She was folding impossibly tiny clothes for the 100th time when her phone rang. Jennifer Ramos, the divorce lawyer she hadn't heard from in weeks. "I wanted to give you a heads up," Jennifer said without preamble. "Ethan's lawyer just reached out. Apparently he wants to discuss visitation rights after all." Claire's hands stilled on a onesie covered in tiny elephants. "What changed?" "No idea, but they're requesting a meeting to discuss a modified custody arrangement. You're under no obligation to agree to anything, but I wanted you to know he's suddenly interested in being involved." After hanging up, Claire stared at her phone for a long time, trying to understand what could have motivated Ethan's change of heart. He'd been adamant about wanting nothing to do with the baby, had signed agreements that made his disinterest legally binding. Why the sudden reversal? The answer came 3 days later, delivered in the form of a text from a number she didn't recognize. It was a screenshot of an Instagram post. Sienna's account, gone public with a lengthy caption about leaving a toxic relationship and choosing herself over public perception. She didn't name Ethan directly, but the implication was clear. Ethan's perfect relationship had imploded publicly, and suddenly he was interested in playing father. The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. He didn't want the baby. He wanted the image rehabilitation that came with being a devoted dad. Claire called Jennifer back immediately. "Tell his lawyer no visitation, no custody arrangement, no involvement. He signed away his rights and I'm holding him to it." "Are you sure?" "The court generally favors allowing fathers access. He made his choice. He called this baby not his problem and spent months building a life that deliberately excluded us. I'm not letting him use my child as a PR strategy now that his image needs repair." Claire's voice was steady, certain. "He can pay his child support as agreed, but that's the extent of his involvement. I want that legally documented." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Okay, I'll make it happen." Claire went into labor on a Tuesday evening, 3 days before her due date. She was having dinner with Adrian when the first contraction hit, stopping her mid-sentence with its intensity. Adrian went very still, his eyes widening. Was that? I think so, but it's probably early labor, could be hours yet. Another contraction followed 20 minutes later, then another 15 minutes after that. Okay, maybe we should time these. By 9 p.m., they were at the hospital. Claire's overnight bag hastily grabbed from her apartment. Mara and Jess called and en route. The contractions were coming faster now, building in intensity, transforming Claire's body into something she didn't quite recognize or control. Labor was brutal and transcendent and longer than she'd hoped. Mara and Jess traded off staying with her, offering ice chips and encouragement and distraction. Adrian stayed the entire time, his presence quiet and steady, holding her hand through contractions and never once suggesting he should leave. At 3:47 a.m., on Wednesday morning, Claire's daughter entered the world with a furious cry that seemed to announce her displeasure at the entire situation. The nurse placed her on Claire's chest, this tiny, angry creature with a shock of dark hair and eyes squeezed shut against the brightness, and something in Claire's heart cracked open in a way she'd never experienced. "She's perfect," Mara whispered from somewhere nearby. "She's really mad," Jess added with a laugh, but Claire couldn't speak, too overwhelmed by the weight of this small life against her chest, by the reality that she was a mother now, that everything had changed in the space of a single breath. The baby's cries quieted as she settled against Claire's skin, tiny fists curling and uncurling, already learning the rhythm of this new world. "Have you decided on a name?" the nurse asked gently. Claire looked down at her daughter, at this person who'd been abstract for months and was now heartbreakingly real. She'd had names picked out for weeks, had narrowed it down to a short list, but now none of them seemed right. This baby deserved something that meant strength and new beginnings and hope. "Maya," Claire said finally. "Her name is Maya." Maya Parker spent her first 2 days in the hospital, learning to nurse and sleep and exist outside the womb, while Claire learned the impossible physics of being responsible for another human's survival. The nursing staff was patient, teaching Claire how to change diapers and swaddle and interpret the different types of cries. Mara and Jess visited constantly, bringing food and supplies and endless emotional support. Adrian came every day, bringing flowers for Claire and sitting quietly while she nursed, never intrusive but always present. On the second evening, he held Maya while Claire showered, and when she emerged, she found him in the rocking chair, the baby asleep against his chest, both of them peaceful. "You're good at that," Claire said softly. "She's easy. All she wants is food and sleep and someone to hold her." Adrian looked up, his expression tender. Kind of refreshing after dealing with adults and their complications. They brought Maya home to the Brooklyn apartment on a Thursday afternoon, the city bright with early summer sunshine. Claire had worried the space would feel too small, too inadequate, but watching Adrian help settle the baby into her nursery, watching Mara and Jess fuss over every detail, it felt exactly right. This was her home, her life, her family of choice. The first weeks of motherhood were harder than anything Claire had ever done. Maya was a terrible sleeper, wanting to nurse constantly, going through diapers at an alarming rate. Claire existed in a fog of exhaustion and hormones and overwhelming love. Her world narrowed to this tiny person's needs. She'd never felt more incompetent or more certain that she was exactly where she needed to be. Adrian visited several times a week, bringing groceries and taking out trash and doing all the small domestic tasks that Claire was too exhausted to manage. He never overstepped, never tried to play father to Maya, but he was reliably present in ways that mattered. Mara and Jess organized a rotation of friends to bring meals and offer companionship during the long, isolated days. But at night, when Maya finally slept and the apartment was quiet, Claire would sit in the rocking chair holding her daughter and marvel at how completely her life had transformed. A year ago, she'd been trapped in a dying marriage, measuring her worth by her husband's approval, slowly losing herself to someone else's vision of who she should be. Now she was a mother, a successful designer, a woman building a life on her own terms. She had work that mattered and friendships that sustained her, and a future that felt limitless despite its complications. Maya was 6 weeks old when Claire received an email from the Parks Department. The South Bronx pilot project had been approved for immediate development, with Claire confirmed as lead designer. They wanted to break ground in 8 weeks, complete the project by fall, use it as a model for future initiatives across the city. Claire read the email 3 times. Maya sleeping in a carrier against her chest, feeling the weight of opportunity pressing against the reality of new motherhood. 8 weeks meant she'd still be deep in the fog of caring for an infant. The project would demand her time and energy and focus at exactly the moment when all three were stretched impossibly thin. She could say no, could explain that the timing was wrong, that she needed to focus on her daughter, that the project would be better served by someone without a newborn. No one would blame her. Everyone would understand. But sitting in her apartment with Maya's small heartbeat against her chest and the future spreading out before them both, Claire realized she didn't want to choose between motherhood and meaningful work. Didn't want to accept that having a baby meant putting her career on hold indefinitely. She'd fought too hard to build this life to start diminishing herself again. She called Robert Ashford directly. "I want to take the project, but I need to be honest about my situation. I have a 6-week-old baby. I can do the design work remotely during her nap times and evenings, but site visits and community meetings will need to be scheduled around childcare availability. If that doesn't work for your timeline, I understand." "Make it work however you need to," Robert said simply. "We want you for this project, Claire. Not some theoretical version of you without complications. The actual you, baby and all. Figure out what you need and let's make it happen." The next months were a careful dance of competing demands and creative solutions. Claire designed the South Bronx project in stolen hours between feedings and diaper changes, working with a level of focused efficiency she'd never managed before motherhood. She brought Maya to community meetings in a carrier, the baby sleeping peacefully against her chest, while Claire presented renderings and listened to neighborhood input. She scheduled site visits around Adrian's availability to watch Maya, building a support system that allowed her to be both mother and professional. The project came together beautifully. A community garden with raised beds for local residents, a playground designed for accessibility, gathering spaces that invited interaction, and native plantings that would thrive with minimal maintenance. It was exactly what Claire had always wanted to create. Design that served actual people rather than just looking impressive in photographs. The day they broke ground, Maya was 3 months old, watching from her stroller with solemn eyes while Claire stood with Robert and community leaders and explained her vision for the space. Local news covered the groundbreaking, and Claire found herself being interviewed while holding her daughter, talking about sustainable design and community empowerment and the importance of green spaces in underserved neighborhoods. That evening, scrolling through social media while nursing Maya before bed, Claire saw that the interview had been shared widely. Design publications were covering it, environmental groups were praising the initiative, and people were responding to the image of a woman balancing serious professional work with visible motherhood. And there, among the comments and shares, was a post from Ethan. He'd shared the interview video with a caption that made Claire's blood run cold. "So proud to see the mother of my daughter doing such important work. Maya is lucky to have such a talented mom. #ProudDad. #CommunityFirst. The audacity was breathtaking. He'd had nothing to do with Maya's life, hadn't visited, hadn't called, had maintained the absolute distance his legal agreement allowed. And now he was publicly claiming fatherhood, using Claire's success and Maya's existence to rehabilitate his image after Sienna's very public departure. Claire's finger hovered over the comment button. She could call him out, could tell the truth about his abandonment, could destroy the narrative he was trying to build. But looking down at Maya nursing peacefully, feeling the solid weight of her daughter in her arms, Claire realized she didn't need to engage. Instead, she posted her own update, a photo of Maya sleeping in her carrier at the groundbreaking, with a simple caption, "Building a better future, one project at a time." So grateful for the community that makes this work possible, and for the family that makes my life whole. No mention of Ethan. No acknowledgement of his attempt to insert himself into their story. Just Claire's truth, simple and complete. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from women sharing their own experiences of single motherhood and professional ambition, from designers praising her work, from community members thanking her for the project. The narrative wasn't about Ethan or divorce or abandonment. It was about Claire building something meaningful while raising her daughter, about refusing to choose between different parts of herself. Adrian came over that evening, letting himself in with the key Claire had given him weeks ago. He found her on the couch with Maya, scrolling through comments and trying not to cry from the combination of exhaustion and unexpected validation. Saw Ethan's post, he said, settling beside her. I'm assuming you're not responding. I already did, just not to him directly. Claire showed him her own post, the comments still accumulating. I'm done letting him control any part of our narrative. He can post whatever he wants. It doesn't change reality. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. You know he's going to keep trying, right? Now that you're getting positive attention, he'll want to associate himself with that success. Let him try. Everyone who actually knows the situation knows the truth, and everyone else doesn't matter. Claire shifted Maya to her shoulder, patting her back gently. I spent 3 years caring too much about other people's opinions. I'm not doing that anymore. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Maya falling asleep between them, the apartment filled with the particular peace that came with evening settling in. Adrian had become such a constant in their lives that Claire sometimes forgot to question it, forgot to worry about what it meant or where it was going. He was just there, reliable and supportive and increasingly essential. I've been thinking, Adrian said eventually, about us, about what this is. Claire's heart did a complicated thing in her chest. They'd been carefully not defining their relationship for months, existing in a comfortable ambiguity that let them be close without the pressure of labels or expectations. And, she prompted when he didn't continue. I'm in love with you, he said simply. I have been for a while. I love the way you think about design, the way you fight for what matters, the way you've rebuilt your life with such determination. I love watching you with Maya, seeing you figure out motherhood with the same thoughtful approach you bring to everything. I just love you, Claire. All of you. The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. Damn postpartum hormones making everything feel impossibly intense. I'm a mess, she said. I haven't slept more than 3 hours at a stretch in months. I smell like milk and baby spit up most of the time. My career is demanding and my daughter will always come first, and I have enough emotional baggage to fill a warehouse. You could have anyone, Adrian. Why would you want this? Because this is real. Because you're real. He reached over, taking her free hand. I spent years around people who performed their lives for social media, who measured relationships by metrics and engagement. You're the first person I've met who just exists authentically, who cares about substance over image. That's worth more than all the polish and perfection in the world. I don't know if I'm ready, Claire admitted. Everything with Ethan left me pretty damaged. I don't know if I can trust someone with my heart again. Then don't. Not yet. Adrian's voice was steady, patient. I'm not asking you to make promises or commitments. I'm just telling you how I feel so you know. We can keep going exactly as we have been, or we can explore what something more might look like. Whatever you need, whatever pace works for you. I'm not going anywhere. Claire looked down at Maya, sleeping peacefully against her shoulder, then back at Adrian, this man who'd shown up consistently, who'd never asked her to be anything other than herself, who'd loved her through messy reality instead of requiring perfect performance. Taking that risk, opening herself to that possibility, felt both terrifying and inevitable. I think I might love you too, she whispered. I'm scared to admit it, but I think I do. Adrian smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face into something warm and open. That's a start. The South Bronx project was completed in October, transforming a vacant lot into a vibrant community space that exceeded everyone's expectations. The opening celebration drew hundreds of people, neighborhood residents, city officials, designers, and activists. Claire stood with Maya in a carrier, now 6 months old and fascinated by everything, watching people experience the space she'd created. Children played on the accessible playground equipment, their laughter echoing off nearby buildings. Community members examined the garden beds, already planning what they'd plant next spring. Elderly residents sat on carefully placed benches, enjoying the green space that had materialized in their neighborhood. It was everything Claire had hoped for, design that served real needs, that brought people together, that made daily life measurably better. Robert Ashford found her during the celebration, his expression warm with satisfaction. This is exactly what we wanted. The community loves it, the city is impressed, and we've already got funding approved for 3 more projects using this as a model. You've started something important here, Claire. That evening, Claire's apartment filled with friends celebrating the project's success. Mara and Jess had organized everything, bringing food and drinks and decorating the small space with surprising elegance. Adrian helped manage the chaos while also keeping Maya entertained, the baby clearly delighted by all the attention. Amanda from MDA arrived with news of her own. A major museum in Los Angeles wanted Claire to design a permanent outdoor installation, a career-defining commission that would cement her reputation nationally. A design publication wanted to feature her in their Designers to Watch issue. The Parks Department was already discussing the next neighborhood project. Claire's life was full to bursting with opportunity and possibility. Her career was thriving on her own terms, her daughter was healthy and happy, her friendships were deep and sustaining. She'd built exactly the life she'd promised herself during those dark early days after Ethan left, a life defined by her choices, her values, her vision of what mattered. Late that night, after everyone had left and Maya was asleep in her crib, Claire stood in the nursery doorway watching her daughter breathe. Adrian came up behind her, his arms circling her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "You did it," he said softly. "You built something extraordinary from absolutely nothing." "Not nothing. I had help, so much help." Claire leaned into his warmth, feeling the solid reality of his presence. "I had friends who refused to let me give up. I had opportunities that found me at exactly the right moments. I had you, showing up consistently even when I was too scared to ask you to. And you had yourself, your talent and determination and refusal to accept anyone else's limitations." Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. "Don't discount that, Claire. You're the reason any of this worked." In the living room, Claire's phone buzzed with a notification. She ignored it, too content in this moment to care about whatever message or email or social media update was demanding attention. But Adrian, ever practical, went to check it. "It's from Ethan," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Do you want me to delete it?" Claire considered, then shook her head. "What does it say?" "It's a long message, basically apologizing for how he handled things, saying he's been in therapy, asking if he can meet Maya. Says he wants to be involved in her life, that he's ready to be a father now." The message should have stirred something, anger or hurt or satisfaction that he was finally acknowledging his mistakes. But Claire felt only a distant pity for someone so fundamentally unable to understand what he'd thrown away. "Tell him no," she said simply. "Tell him Maya has everything she needs. Tell him to move forward with his life, and let us move forward with ours." Adrian typed out a response, showing it to Claire before sending. It was polite but firm, making clear that Ethan's opportunity for involvement had passed, that Claire had built a life that didn't include space for his belated regrets. After it sent, Adrian blocked the number, creating one more layer of separation between Claire's present and her past. "Done," he said. "He's gone. For good this time." Claire felt something release in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying for so long she'd stopped noticing its weight. Ethan was finally, completely, relegated to history. A chapter that had ended, a lesson learned, a person she'd once loved who'd proven unworthy of that love. He had no power over her anymore, no claim on her attention or energy or emotional bandwidth. She was free. Completely. Finally free. 6 months later, Claire stood in a gallery in Los Angeles, surrounded by people admiring photographs of her museum installation. Maya, now a year old and walking with determined wobbles, was being entertained by Mara in a corner. Adrian stood beside Claire, his hand resting casually on her lower back, a gesture of connection that had become natural over months of building their relationship with patient care. The installation had been a triumph, a permanent outdoor space that brought native California ecology into the museum grounds, creating a living education center that would serve the public for decades. The commission had led to others, her reputation growing not through social media performance, but through actual work that mattered. Claire Parker, the woman Ethan had called forgettable, was being celebrated as one of the most innovative landscape architects of her generation. She'd been featured in major publications, had projects across the country, was regularly invited to speak at conferences and universities. She'd built a career based on substance and skill, an unwavering commitment to design that served people rather than just impressing them. But standing in that gallery, watching her daughter toddle across the polished floor and feeling Adrian's steady presence beside her, Claire knew the professional success wasn't the real victory. The real victory was the life she'd built, messy and demanding and beautifully real. A life where she was valued for who she actually was, where her worth wasn't contingent on anyone else's approval, where she'd created her own definition of success. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, probably another congratulatory message or commission inquiry. Claire ignored it, choosing instead to scoop Maya up and spin her around, the baby's delighted laughter filling the gallery. This moment, this life, this hard-won peace, this was what mattered. Not revenge or vindication or proving anything to anyone. Just the quiet triumph of being fully, unapologetically herself, surrounded by people who loved her for exactly that reason. Claire Parker had started her story as someone's discarded wife, publicly humiliated and privately devastated. She was ending it as her own person, a mother, a designer, a woman who'd transformed catastrophe into opportunity and emerged stronger for the breaking. And that, she decided, as Maya laughed against her shoulder and Adrian smiled at them both, was the best possible ending she could have written.